Chapter 161, Prelude to End of the Year Festival, 2. The end of year festival was rapidly approaching, and with it, the weight of expectations. Not from the academy, not from the world, but from within. This wasn't just about winning a battle or proving my strength. It was about understanding myself, finally, truly knowing who I was beneath every scar and every whispered promise of destiny. I needed to understand myself. My feelings, my desires, things I had spent too long ignoring, treating them as side quests in the grander scheme of survival. But that no longer worked. The closer I got to the battle with Lucifer, the more I realized I wasn't just fighting for strength. I was fighting to know. To finally admit that beneath the armor and the endless training, there was a heart yearning for clarity. The first step was letting my feelings be known, at least, in some way. "All right," Cecilia said first, her arms crossed and her gaze unwavering as she faced me in the twilight. "I don't care if you win or not, Nightingale. The one whose side I want to stand on is yours." Her words, blunt and resolute, carried more weight than any promise made on a battlefield. Rachel's breath hitched slightly beside me. "Cecilia," she began, hesitation mingling with hope in her tone. "I know, but I don't care," Cecilia cut her off, her voice firm as she added, "I trust Arthur." There was no condition, no hidden caveat, just an unwavering trust that resonated deep within me. A warmth bloomed in my chest, not merely from the sincerity of her words, but from the clarity they brought. There was no hesitation, no, "if you win, then," just a declaration of faith. Rachel's sapphire eyes locked onto mine as she continued, "Same for me. Since that day, when we fought the abyssal tide serpent, I knew. I wanted to fight for you, Arthur. I want to be your saintess. Win or lose, it doesn't matter to me, as long as I can be with you." Her voice was fragile and powerful at once, carrying the weight of shared battles and unspoken promises. Something in me shifted then, as if the pieces of my internal puzzle were clicking into place. "That's enough for me," I said, smiling at them both, feeling the bonds of trust and affection fortify my resolve. But there were still others I needed to see. At the edge of the academy gardens, Seraphina stood watching the fading hues of dusk with an expression that was almost serene, almost. "You never call me out unless you have something important to say," she said before I could even open my mouth. I chuckled. "Am I that predictable?" "You're that calculated," she replied, turning to face me fully. Moonlight caught her silver hair, scattering reflections like whispers of ancient secrets. "What is it?" I hesitated, not from doubt, but because Seraphina demanded words chosen with care. "I wanted to thank you," I said finally. She blinked, her violet eyes searching mine. "For what?" "For trusting me enough to bring me to Mount Hua," I confessed. "For believing in me when I didn't even know what I was doing. For simply being there when I needed someone to remind me of who I could become." Seraphina's gaze softened, her usual inscrutability giving way to a quiet pride. "You're different now," she murmured, as if noting a subtle transformation hidden beneath layers of familiar determination. I shrugged. "I'm still figuring things out." She nodded slowly. "Then figure them out. And when you do, when you truly know who you are and what you want, don't hesitate to be that person. The world needs you, Arthur." I smiled, feeling both the weight and the lift of her words. "I won't." A small, almost imperceptible smile ghosted across her lips before she turned away. "Good. Now go. You have one more person left, don't you?" Rose was exactly where I expected her to be, perched on the balcony of her dorm, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and affection as I landed silently beside her. "You're visiting everyone tonight, aren't you?" she teased, taking a slow sip of her coffee as if savoring more than just the flavor. "Word travels fast," I replied with a light-hearted smirk. Rose grinned. "When it involves you, it flies." I leaned against the cold, metal railing, gazing out at the dark sea stretching endlessly around the academy's isolated island. No distant city lights, no signs of civilization, just the vast horizon where sky met ocean in an endless embrace. The only illumination came from the academy itself, its soft artificial glow barely reaching the island's fringes. "I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you," I said quietly, my voice almost lost to the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. Rose tilted her head, her eyes narrowing in playful suspicion. "That sounds suspiciously like a goodbye." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, just a thank you. For everything, for helping me battle the Lich when I was too lost in my own darkness, for dragging me to that quirky little coffee shop when I needed a reminder of light, for simply being you." For a long moment, Rose said nothing, as if weighing each word carefully. Then, she set down her cup and turned to face me fully, her arms now crossed in that familiar, challenging stance. "Arthur Nightingale," she said, her tone light but her eyes unwavering in their seriousness, "if you ever stop being you, I will personally beat you back into shape." I smirked. "I'll keep that in mind." Leaning in, her voice softened, dropping just enough for only me to hear, "You're going to win, you know. I can feel it in every beat of this chaotic heart of yours." A slow breath escaped me, measured and resolute. "Yeah," I replied, locking my gaze with hers. "I can feel it too." Rose's grin widened as she playfully clinked her coffee mug against my shoulder. "Then go prove it." I walked away from the balcony, the cool night air wrapping around me like a promise of new beginnings. I was different now, in ways I hadn't fully grasped yet. The faces of those I cared for, their trust and declarations, had carved a path within me, illuminating parts of my soul long left shrouded in shadow. Every step I took reminded me that this world, even with its looming fate and its scars from ancient wars, was the only one I had ever loved. Coming to this world, even knowing its doom, felt better than anything I had experienced before. It was my world, a tapestry of light and darkness, love and duty, hope and despair. And as much as the path ahead was fraught with peril, it was mine to traverse. I would fight for it. I would save it. Later, I found myself back at the training grounds, a vast, deserted expanse lit only by the hum of artificial lights casting long, wavering shadows over the worn flooring. The remnants of countless battles clung to the air, a faint scent of scorched metal, lingering mana residue, and echoes of valor whispered by the wind. Here, in the silence of impending conflict, every breath felt sacred. I took a deep breath, letting the charged air fill my lungs, and then whispered a name that had haunted me for as long as I could remember. Erebus. Almost immediately, a tear in space formed, a jagged slit of darkness that seemed to tear reality itself asunder. From it, Erebus emerged, his skeletal frame towering and ominous, the Evernight staff pulsing faintly even under the limiter's suppression. Shadows coiled around him like living serpents, restrained yet full of barely contained fury. "Yes, Master," he intoned, his voice a deep, unnatural reverberation that sent shivers through the silent arena. I rolled my shoulders, feeling the familiar pulse of loosened harmony thrumming beneath my skin, the Chelan sigils on my arms igniting with mana. Every fiber of my being resonated with the weight of what was to come. "All right," I exhaled slowly, cracking my neck as if to brace myself against the inevitable storm. "Let's do this." Chapter 162, The End of the Year Festival, 1. The End of the Year Festival at Mythos Academy wasn't just a school event. It was a spectacle, a coliseum for the future legends of the world, an arena where prodigies fought not just for victory, but for their place in history. Even beyond the families of the students, many of whom were nobles, heirs, or prodigal talents, the festival was watched across continents, broadcasted in high definition to every corner of the world. It wasn't just a matter of school pride. It was a global event, a measuring stick for the generation that would one day inherit power. Because even among the elite, a true genius would always shine. And the crown jewel of the festival? The Sovereign's Tournament, a single elimination tournament that would determine the strongest student in each year. A contest where reputations were forged and shattered in real time, a battlefield where talent and discipline collided under the scrutiny of the world. But beyond the tournament, it was still a festival. A celebration. Mythos Academy, the single most advanced educational institution on the planet, opened its gates to visitors for the first and only time in the year. From dazzling magical showcases to cutting-edge technological exhibitions, every corner of the academy buzzed with life. It was a place where parents swelled with pride, sponsors scouted for the next rising star, and influential organizations vied for promising talent. For many students, the tournament wasn't just about winning. It was about getting noticed. Not every noble heir would inherit their family's seat of power. Not every student was destined for greatness. But a solid performance, an impressive display of skill, mana control, or sheer determination, was often enough to catch the eye of a top guild, a corporate benefactor, or a world-class mentor. In an era where strength dictated opportunity, this was their proving ground. And at the heart of the Colosseum, anticipation crackled in the air like static before a storm. The grand arena of Mythos Academy stretched skyward, tiered seating forming an unbroken circle around the battlefield. Towering banners, emblazoned with the Academy's crest, flapped against the wind, their edges lined with intricate mana-imbued embroidery that shimmered in the light. Above, floating drones captured every angle of the event, broadcasting live across the world. The crowd had reached a fever pitch, a sea of voices merging into an electric hum of anticipation. The scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint hint of alchemical fireworks, which would soon illuminate the sky in celebration. Then, silence. A single figure stepped onto the elevated platform at the center of the arena, and the world paused to listen. Valerie. Her presence alone commanded attention. Dressed in ceremonial robes woven with golden filigree, she stood tall, regal, even. Her deep violet eyes swept across the assembled crowd, assessing, acknowledging. Then she spoke, her voice crisp, clear, and amplified across the entire Colosseum. "Welcome," Valerie said, and the word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "To the end of the year festival and the Sovereign's tournament." The applause was deafening, but she simply waited. When the noise settled, she continued. "This tournament is not just a contest. It is not just a performance for the world to witness. It is proof. Proof of the countless hours you have spent honing your craft. Proof of your skill, your discipline, your will to rise above." Her gaze flickered over the competitors standing in the waiting area. The title of Sovereign is not just a prize. It is a legacy. It is the mark of a leader, of someone who refuses to be overshadowed. But remember, true strength is not found in victory alone, but in the resolve to stand and fight. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "To all our competitors, show us your determination. Show us what it means to be a student of Mythos Academy." Then, with the faintest smirk curving her lips, she finished, "Let the games begin." The arena erupted into cheers, the very ground seeming to tremble beneath the sheer energy of the moment. Far above, in the VVIP viewing box, where only the most influential figures sat, a quiet chuckle echoed. "You do give a good speech, Valerie," mused Lee Zenith, master of Mount Hua, his voice carrying a note of approval. The VVIP section was an isolated, luxurious space high above the Colosseum, offering an unparalleled view of the arena below. Reserved for only the most powerful figures, it was filled with representatives of the great families and factions of the world. Among them sat Leon Vizirian, the ever-smiling descendant of the southern continent's ruling clan, his vibrant red hair practically glowing in the sunlight. Duke Blaze Spout, a peak immortal ranker and the head of the Slate Mark Empire's second most powerful military family, observed the proceedings with arms crossed. Beside him, Kem Kagu from the Kagu family exuded quiet menace. And from the western continent's depths, the unassuming Paul Locrian, the man considered to have reached the peak of necromancy through sheer skill, without supernatural aid, watched in thoughtful silence. "Well," Duke Blazespout mused, swirling the wine in his glass, "if you're taking over for Eva as overseer here, you certainly have the presence for it." Valerie, now seated among them, sighed as she adjusted the high collar of her robes. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Leon chuckled. "You say that, but you didn't stutter once. That's more than I can say for most leaders." Valerie rolled her eyes, sinking into her chair. "I'd rather be on the battlefield." Some would say this is the battlefield, Lee Zenith remarked, his sharp gaze never leaving the arena below. Duke Blazespout leaned back in his seat, swirling the amber liquid in his glass with practiced ease. Then tell me, Master Lee, who do you believe will stand victorious? His voice carried the weight of a man who had seen countless warriors rise and fall, a man who understood that power was never as straightforward as it seemed. It has to be the child of prophecy, Leon Vizirian interjected, lounging with the effortless confidence of someone who had never once questioned the natural order of things. His crimson eyes gleamed in the light. It has to be Lucifer Windward. Perhaps, Paul Locrian finally spoke, his voice slow, deliberate, as though he was considering every word with great weight. But I heard Arthur Nightingale created a lich. That alone is enough to make one reconsider. Kem Kagu, who had remained silent up until now, let out a quiet scoff. His lich is incomplete. If he had managed to form a true lich at the age of 15. He trailed off, shaking his head, a rare expression of amusement flickering across his normally impassive face. There would be no question that he is the second hero. But that would be impossible. No human is that absurdly talented. The air in the VVIP box thickened, tension crackling between the gathered elites like an impending storm. Then, Lee Zenith smiled. Arthur will win. The words landed like a sudden shift in gravity, drawing all eyes to the silver-haired swordsman. Valerie leaned forward, resting her chin against her knuckles. That's quite the claim. It's more than a claim, Lee replied, his voice calm but certain. It's an inevitability. Leon arched an eyebrow. You're saying Arthur Nightingale, a commoner, no less, will defeat Lucifer Windward, the most absurd prodigy of our generation? His lips curled into a smirk, but there was an unmistakable flicker of curiosity behind his gaze. Lee Zenith exhaled softly, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest of his chair. I saw it, he murmured, almost to himself. I saw what he truly is. Silence. A pause, loaded with something none of them could quite name. Then, Lee finally looked up, his dark eyes gleaming with something close to reverence. What you all call talent, that unfair and absurd thing that defines the greatest among us. His lips curved ever so slightly. You will understand it now. Chapter 163, The End of the Year Festival, 2. The countdown ticked down like the final beats of a war drum, each number tightening the coil of tension winding through the 100 students scattered across the battlefield. Arthur stood amidst it all, a quiet force bracing for the inevitable storm. Then, the world shifted. A flash of light enveloped him, and when it faded, the roar of the crowd in the stadium was gone, replaced by the hush of the wild. He landed in a dense forest, the ground beneath him soft with fallen leaves, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. A breeze rustled through the towering canopy, shafts of filtered sunlight breaking through in patches. Arthur let out a slow breath, his muscles already coiled in readiness. A battle royale wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the last one standing. Above him, mechanical drones flitted through the sky, their sleek forms barely noticeable against the clouds. The spectators, millions of them, were watching through countless camera feeds. Some were probably placing bets. Others were eagerly awaiting the first elimination, the first dramatic clash. Arthur ignored all of it. This wasn't a show. This was a test. He had no idea where his opponents had landed. The entire battlefield was massive, spanning biomes ranging from barren rock formations to treacherous swamps, from open plains to crumbling ruins half devoured by nature. It was a carefully designed chaos, meant to push the students to their limits. Arthur moved quickly, scaling the nearest tree in a few swift leaps. From his new vantage point, he surveyed the terrain, eyes sharp. The arena wasn't empty. Mana beasts lurked beneath the foliage, waiting. Arthur spotted a horned rat scuttling through the underbrush, a 2-star mana beast, harmless alone, but dangerous in packs. That was another thing about this round, the environment itself was an enemy. Not just the students. He let his breathing slow, his mind ticking through possibilities. Recklessness would get him eliminated. This was a battle of attrition. Charging into a fight would only draw more combatants like vultures to a fresh carcass. Arthur's best strategy? Let the fools whittle each other down. Pick his battles. Conserve energy. He tensed as a movement caught his eye. Not a mana beast this time. A group of 3 students, already forming an alliance. Idiots. Alliances in a battle royale were as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. They worked, until they didn't. Until someone saw an opportunity to betray, and the whole thing collapsed in on itself. Arthur shifted slightly, staying completely hidden. Let them fight amongst themselves first. He had no intention of being their first opponent. Elsewhere, Jean Ashbluff was already reaping eliminations like a silent executioner. He moved like a whisper in the wind, his twin swords mere extensions of his will. 2 girls stood by a riverbank, unaware, too comfortable in their momentary truce. Jean didn't hesitate. His form blurred. The flat of his blades tapped against their backs. 2 startled gasps. A second later, their bodies dissolved in light, their emergency teleportation artifacts activating. Eliminated. Jean didn't watch them vanish. He had already melted back into the shadows, his mind already calculating his next move. Underscore 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 underscore. The air in the VVIP box buzzed with quiet conversation, the faint hum of screens displaying the battle royale feeding the anticipation. That Ashbluff kid is as impressive as ever, Leon mused, his red eyes gleaming as he watched Jean dismantle his opponents with surgical precision. The rulers of the West have always been monsters in the sword, Duke Blazespout agreed, nodding approvingly. Even without his family's necromantic heritage, the boy would still be a force to reckon with. Kem Kagu, his expression contemplative, turned to the Duke. Speaking of prodigies, your son is still at Slate Mark Academy, isn't he? Why not enroll him here at Mythos Academy? The Duke smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at deeper calculations. Jack is special, he said simply. And for now, I'd rather keep him close. Kem chuckled. Parental love, is it? Your son is said to be exceptionally talented. Perhaps on par with our dear prodigies here. Jack is strong, the Duke admitted, though his tone remained measured. But let's not place him above his station just yet. Leon smirked. Humble as always, Duke. The Inter-Academy Festival next year will be quite the spectacle. I'll have to convince my brother to attend again. We'll see then, the Duke said, his smile deepening. Who truly deserves to be called the strongest? Back in the battle royale, the weaker contestants were falling like dominoes, some taken out by their peers, others by the mana beasts lurking in the arena. Though the students of Mythos Academy were far from weak in the grand scheme of things, against the true elites, they were little more than stepping stones. The camera feed shifted to Ren Kagu. He stood among 3 downed opponents, his breathing steady, his purple eyes glinting with cold indifference. A punch aimed at him from behind. Ren didn't turn. Instead, he shifted his weight just so, letting the fist brush past his shoulder as if he had predicted the attack before it was even conceived. The counter came in an instant, a ruthless elbow to the ribs that sent his opponent crumpling to the ground, gasping for air. Kem's lips curled into a pleased smile. That's it, Ren. Ren barely glanced at his fallen foes before moving on, his mind already dissecting his next confrontation. God's eyes wasn't just about sight, it was perception, a map of the battlefield sketched out in his mind with the clarity of prophecy. The feed lingered on his expressionless face before flickering away. Leon sighed, tapping his fingers against the edge of his seat. He's quite something, your son. Kem nodded, his eyes gleaming with pride. Indeed. But this is only the beginning. Ren will continue to rise, and soon enough, the entire world will recognize the strength of the Kagu family once again. Lee Zenith, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Ren is certainly talented, he admitted, his fingers tapping against his screen. But I wouldn't count Arthur out. The monitors shifted again. Arthur Nightingale. Arthur moved through the forest like a ghost. His steps were silent on the mossy ground, his posture unhurried. He was not searching for a fight. No, the fight was coming to him. He could feel it. 2, 3, 4. He mentally counted the mana signatures edging closer, their owners doing a poor job of masking their intentions. He didn't flinch. Didn't tense. Just waited. Are you going to attack? He finally said, his voice carrying a note of dry amusement, or are you planning to stare at me from the shadows until the round ends? The ambush came immediately. A mana-infused arrow hissed through the air from his left. Too predictable. Arthur caught it mid-flight, his fingers closing around the shaft like a vice. With a sharp squeeze, the projectile crumbled to dust in his grip. The second attacker lunged from behind. An axe. A wild, heavy strike meant to cleave him in two. Leon leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Will he block? Arthur did not block. Instead, he redirected. With a twist of his wrist, his sword met the axe not with force, but with precision, guiding its momentum off course as if it had never belonged in his opponent's hands to begin with. The attacker stumbled forward, thrown off balance. Arthur let him fall. He had bigger problems. 3 more figures burst from the underbrush, magic blazing in their hands. The strongest among them was a girl with a katana, Aki. Her blade vibrated with a high-frequency sonic wave, the air itself splitting with each strike. A grade 4 art. Arthur exhaled, adjusting his stance. That's Aki, Valerie noted, her voice composed. She's strong. Aki surged forward, her katana a blur of afterimages. She was fast. Faster than most would expect. Arthur's sword multiplied. No, not really. Illusion sword. 3 copies of his blade danced in the air, shifting positions so seamlessly that even a trained eye struggled to follow. Which was real? Aki's hesitation cost her. Arthur's real sword found its mark, the flat of the blade tapping against her wrist. A subtle, almost mocking strike. He could have ended the fight right then and there. But instead, he waited. Aki's breath hitched. She understood. She'd already lost. Chapter 164, The End of the Year Festival, 3. The battle royale had begun with a flurry of alliances, betrayals, and desperate struggles for dominance. Every student knew that survival alone wouldn't guarantee a place in the final 8. The evaluation system, the combined judgment of the Academy's AI, the professors, and man-imbued monitoring devices, didn't simply reward endurance. It demanded excellence. And so, strategies formed. Many of the weaker students sought to challenge the titans of Class 1A, not because they expected to win, but because standing against the best was the surest way to prove their worth. But this was not a battle they could win. Class 1A was on a different level, their prowess shaped by resources, talent, and sheer will. Most wielded Grade 5 arts granted by Mythos Academy itself, and some had inherited Grade 6 arts, the pinnacle of combat techniques, from their powerful families. In the midst of these giants stood Arthur Nightingale, rank 2, an enigma among the elite. His rise had been meteoric. From rank 8 at the start of the year to rank 2 after the midterms, he had defied all expectations. Yet, he was still underestimated. The whispers persisted, he doesn't have a Grade 6 art. Is he really that strong? Arthur didn't care for their doubts. His goal wasn't to silence whispers. It was to win. And now, as the battlefield thinned, he was about to prove it. Lucifer Windward stood frozen, literally. His left side was encased in ice, jagged spikes of frost locking him to the battlefield. Even the ground beneath him had turned to glassy permafrost. His sword was planted deep in the frozen earth, his verdant eyes gleaming with both surprise and irritation. And opposite him stood Arthur, his blade steady, his stance unshaken. "Why are you here?" Lucifer demanded, his voice even but sharp. Arthur tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Then, with calm certainty, he pointed his sword forward. "Why do you think?" Lucifer exhaled sharply, gripping his weapon tighter. This was going to be interesting. Elsewhere, Renkagu exhaled as another trio of fallen students were whisked away by the Academy's automated teleportation system. The battlefield was swiftly clearing, and the weak had already been culled. Good. He didn't like wasting time. Still, something gnawed at the edge of his awareness. A presence. Ren's fingers twitched, and he quietly drew in more mana, letting it course through his body. God's eyes sharpened his vision, revealing the battlefield in unnerving clarity. Every movement, every pulse of mana, every breath of his surroundings, etched into his mind like a divine script. And then, he found it. A figure lurking in the shadows. A familiar one. "Come out already," Ren muttered, clicking his tongue. A girl stepped forward, the glow of crimson magic forming a jagged crown above her head. Cecilia Slatemark. Ren's gaze flickered to another presence behind him, and before he could react, a spear of golden light streaked toward him. Rachel Creighton. Ren thrust his hand forward, bending space itself to halt the projectile midair. The arrow of light hovered before him, shimmering ominously. "Not afraid of being eliminated?" he asked, his tone dry. Rachel smiled, a playful glint in her sapphire eyes. "You're fun to mess with. That's all." Ren scoffed, letting the light dissipate. "Bold of you to think you stand a chance." "You're arrogant," Rachel mused, flipping her golden hair over her shoulder. "I don't like that." Ren didn't reply. He didn't need to. Cecilia cracked her knuckles, her own magic flaring around her. "Oh, I love that." Ren's smirk widened as his mana surged, his white rank core humming with raw power. "You really think the two of you together can match me?" Rachel's light flared. Cecilia's chaos twisted the air. And Ren simply waited. Because no matter what they tried, he would see everything. Suddenly, a voice rang through every student's earpiece. 92 students have been eliminated. The battle royale is now over. The tension snapped in an instant. Rachel lowered her arrows. Cecilia let her magic dissipate. Ren exhaled, his stance relaxing. Jean, standing atop the battlefield like a king without a crown, flicked his swords clean. Lucifer pulled his blade from the icy ground, his eyes never leaving Arthur. "Arthur?" He simply exhaled. The battle was over. The real fight was just beginning. In the VVIP box, the gathered dignitaries watched as the names of the final 8 flashed across the screens. Lucifer Windward. Arthur Nightingale. Renkagu. Jean Ashbluff. Rachel Creighton. Cecilia Slatemark. Ian Vizirian. Serafina Zenith. Lee Zenith smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Now this is a tournament worth watching." Underscore 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 underscore. Lucifer collapsed onto the bed, exhaling deeply as his muscles finally surrendered to rest. His limbs ached, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer tension of staying at the razor's edge of control throughout the battle royale. He hadn't needed to push himself. No, that would have been unnecessary. Wasteful. Finishing first had been inevitable. Still, he let himself sink into the plush mattress, staring at the ceiling, his mind churning with the aftermath. The battle royale hadn't truly been a challenge, just an exercise in patience, a game of endurance where he merely had to avoid unnecessary exertion. But even an exercise in patience could be interesting. Ren Kagu had finished third. That was expected. Ren had yet to unveil his grade 6 art, which, frankly, made his ranking all the more impressive. White rank. Like him. That alone solidified Ren as the closest thing to an actual rival. Then there was Luke Orden, who had proven to be a stubborn obstacle. Even with lower mana reserves, Luke had fought with remarkable ingenuity. Lucifer had needed to adjust his pacing slightly to eliminate him, and in doing so, he had made a mental note: Luke was worth watching. But none of them had mattered as much as Arthur. Lucifer ran a hand through his golden hair, his brows furrowing as the memory of their brief clash replayed in his mind. He hadn't expected Arthur to seek him out so early. That wasn't how these things usually went. The battle royale was a culling ground, a warm-up for the real fight, the Sovereign's Tournament. Lucifer had fully expected their encounter to come in the semi-finals at the earliest. Instead, Arthur had deliberately sought him out, as if he had something to prove. And maybe he did. Arthur had always been a strange one. Capable, of course, but never someone Lucifer had truly considered dangerous. Their previous fight had been little more than a technicality. Lucifer had limited himself, restraining his mana to Arthur's level, keeping his gift's active ability locked away, refraining from using his grade 6 art. A test, nothing more. Yet Arthur had won. And still, Lucifer had never really seen him as a threat. Not even when Arthur unlocked his gift after the ordeal at the Cobalt Sea. Not even when he climbed to rank 2 of Class A. Not even when he forged a lich, of all things. Because Arthur wasn't the second hero. Lucifer Windward was. It was obvious. It was preordained. The prophecy dictated it. No one else could possibly rise higher. Not Arthur. Not Ren. Not anyone. Yet, that fleeting moment between them in the battle royale had unsettled him. Lucifer had clashed with Arthur for only seconds, a brief collision of wills that left no true victor, but the memory of it lingered in his bones. It was different. Arthur felt different. His movements were sharper. His mana was heavier. His presence, undeniable. Lucifer closed his eyes for a moment, pressing his palm against his forehead. Annoying. It was annoying how Arthur kept forcing himself into the narrative. He was supposed to be a stepping stone. Someone who shined brightly, only to fall when it mattered most. That was how this was supposed to go. Lucifer had spent his entire life knowing that he was meant for greatness. He was the one destined to stand above all. He didn't resent Ren for being strong. He didn't resent Arthur for growing. He simply knew that, in the end, they would lose. Because they had to. Still, his lips quirked upward, his heart thrumming in his chest with something almost like excitement. Let's see how far you've really come, Arthur. Because soon, all doubts would be erased. Chapter 165, Sovereign's Tournament, 1. The stadium pulsed with excitement, the massive arena alive with the raw anticipation of thousands of spectators. The air shimmered with the energy of countless eyes locked on the stage, all waiting for the first match of the tournament to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, Valerie's voice rang through the arena, smooth yet commanding. Welcome to the Sovereigns Tournament for the first-year students of Mythos Academy. The cheers rose like a tidal wave, crashing against the reinforced barrier surrounding the battlefield. The festival was many things: tradition, spectacle, proof of strength, but above all, it was a stage. A place where only the greatest talents shone. This is the pinnacle of spellcasting and martial combat among first years. Soon, we will witness the rise of a genius among geniuses, the one who will claim the title of sovereign. Excitement surged through the crowd. Faces flashed across the massive holographic screens, each student's ranking displayed next to their image. At the very top, Lucifer Windward, rank 1. And his first opponent? Seraphina Zenith. The first match will be between Seraphina Zenith, Princess of Mount Hua Sect, and Lucifer Windward, Prince of the North. A shift in the air. Even the audience quieted for a moment as both names were spoken together. Everyone knew what this meant. Seraphina, the elven princess of Mount Hua, renowned for her ice crystal jade body, a gift that made her an unparalleled ice mage. And Lucifer, the crowned prodigy of the North, bearer of the yin-yang body, an existence that embodied absolute balance and destruction. The odds weren't just stacked against Seraphina. They were crushing her beneath them. Still, she exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cold mist forming around her as she stepped onto the battlefield. Her long silver hair glimmered under the artificial lights, her violet eyes unreadable as she stared at the figure waiting for her. Lucifer stood lazily at the center of the stage, his verdant green eyes holding no tension, no urgency, just supreme confidence. He hadn't even drawn his sword yet. He doesn't take me seriously. Seraphina ignored the heat pooling in her chest, the simmering frustration at being underestimated. She was used to this. She had been born into a world where expectations crushed those who could not rise. If she let the weight of it push her down, she would never be able to reach her own summit. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Then she moved. The battle began. Breathe. Move. Breathe. Move. Seraphina vanished from where she stood, the ground beneath her freezing over as she propelled herself forward with a burst of compressed ice mana. Her sword flashed, the crystalline edge humming with frozen energy. Lucifer finally moved, slowly, almost carelessly, his hand reaching for his blade. Just as her strike was about to reach him, he parried. A single stroke. Effortless. Seraphina's attack was stopped cold. Her violet eyes flickered with surprise. Not because he had blocked her, she expected that, but because she felt nothing. There was no pushback, no resistance. Her entire momentum was absorbed, diffused into nothingness. What? Too slow, Lucifer murmured. Then he stepped forward. And everything changed. His sword slashed downward, the air itself splitting apart, sending a violent shockwave rippling toward her. Seraphina gritted her teeth, her instincts screaming. She twisted, spinning away as her ice mana surged outward, forming a protective frost barrier. The force of his strike shattered the ice in an instant, but she had already repositioned, breathing heavily. Lucifer sighed. This is a waste of time. Seraphina refused to accept that. She slammed her sword into the ground, and instantly, ice erupted from below, jagged glaciers racing toward Lucifer like a frozen tide. The temperature plummeted in the arena, the very air crystallizing into frost as her grade 6 art began to manifest. A brilliant violet hue radiated from her body, mana coalescing into the shape of an enormous setting sun behind her. Violet Sunset Genesis. Lucifer blinked, as if actually acknowledging the threat. That alone was an accomplishment. Seraphina gritted her teeth as the final phase activated. The frozen spikes launched toward Lucifer in a perfect sequence, a pattern that ensured there was no escape. It was Mount Hua's greatest offensive ice art, one that would swallow the battlefield in an inescapable, freezing onslaught. And yet, Lucifer simply sighed. He raised his free hand. And darkness bloomed. Black and white mana swirled together, forming a concentrated sphere of yin-yang energy. In the next instant, Lucifer dropped it, sending it crashing into the advancing ice. The moment it touched the frost, everything collapsed. The ice shattered into dust, the sheer force of Lucifer's mana annihilating her attack like a child's drawing wiped from a board. A deep, gut-wrenching silence settled over the stadium. Seraphina stood frozen in place, her breath ragged. Her attack, her strongest, most perfected technique, had been erased. Lucifer finally took a step forward. Seraphina instinctively raised her sword, but the moment his blade flickered, she was already on the ground. The crowd barely even saw what happened. The gap was simply too wide. Lucifer stood over her, his expression completely unreadable. "You did well," he said, voice quiet. "But in the end, you were never going to win." Seraphina tried to push herself up, but her body refused to move. Her mind screamed at her to fight, but her limbs felt like lead. She was out of mana. She had lost. The final buzzer sounded. The match was over. Lucifer turned away, already dismissing her existence as he sheathed his sword. "Winner, Lucifer Windward." Valerie's voice boomed through the arena, and the cheers erupted once more. Lucifer sighed as he exited the battlefield, his mind already shifting ahead. Seraphina Zenith had been a minor obstacle. A stepping stone. Because the only fights that actually mattered were still to come. Underscore 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 underscore. I can't believe he used it, I thought, my eyes narrowing as I watched Lucifer leave the battlefield, the weight of his presence lingering in the air like a fading storm. The reason Lucifer Windward was called the second hero wasn't just his overwhelming talent or sheer dominance. It was that power. Lucifer couldn't wield light mana or dark mana like me. Instead, he commanded something different, white mana and black mana. A phenomenon no one could understand. A force that existed outside the conventional structure of magic, something that defied classification. No scholar, no researcher, no archmage could explain it. It was simply the yin-yang body, his gift. A supernatural power that no one else in the world possessed. A gift that let him obliterate Seraphina Zenith in an instant, as if all her efforts had never mattered. Of course, that kind of devastation was only possible because of the sheer difference in their mana ranks. She was still high silver rank, while he had already stepped into white rank, a threshold that only a handful of students in the entire lower years had reached. But even if they had been equals in rank, would the result have changed? Lucifer was a monster. That much was undeniable. But that just made things more interesting. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders. I wanted to go to Seraphina, to offer words of comfort, to remind her that this was not the end, that there was still a long road ahead. But I couldn't. Because I was up next. And my opponent? Ian Vizirian. The Dragon Prince of the South. A descendant of dragons, a fighter who wielded flame as if it were an extension of his very being. A powerhouse in his own right. I had no room for distractions. Still, as I walked past Seraphina, I let my hand brush lightly against hers. "Raise your head," I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "You did well." She looked at me, her ice-blue eyes still glistening with exhaustion, frustration, and something else, a quiet determination that had yet to be extinguished. Then, she smiled. Just slightly. That was enough. I turned away and ascended the steps, stepping onto the battlefield. It was time. Chapter 166, Sovereign's Tournament, 2. The moment my boots touched the arena floor, a low murmur rippled through the audience. Excitement, anticipation, and the lingering shock from Lucifer's display all hung in the air like charged electricity. Across from me, Ian Viserion rolled his shoulders, golden red flames flickering in the depths of his pupils. His presence alone exuded a quiet menace, his mana coiling around him in the shape of ethereal dragon wings, barely visible but unmistakably real. Ian was a Viserion. A prince of the southern continent. A descendant of dragons. A born fighter. And he wasn't planning to lose. "I knew I'd be facing you at some point, Arthur," Ian said, rolling his neck. A grin tugged at his lips, sharp and eager. "Honestly, I was hoping it would be later. You're a tough fight to start with." "You sound like you've already accepted your loss," I replied, drawing my sword from its sheath. My voice was light, but the Chelan sigils on my arms flickered to life, signaling my intent as I activated Lucent Harmony. Ian huffed, stepping into a low stance, fire igniting along his hands and forearms. "Not a chance." The referee raised his hand. "Begin." Ian moved first, a blur of golden fire streaking across the battlefield. Fast. Not quite at Lucifer or Ren's level, but fast enough to keep up with most first years. He led with a heavy right hook, flames twisting around his knuckles, the sheer heat warping the air. I didn't dodge. Instead, I lifted my sword and met his strike head-on. Clang. The moment our attacks connected, a shockwave burst outward, rattling the arena floor. Ian grinned. "Good, you're not going to just dodge the whole fight." I pushed forward, my blade carving through the air with ruthless precision. Tempest Dance. A grade 5 sword art, one that built momentum and compounded power with each successful movement. I struck. Once. Twice. Each movement flowing into the next, the weight behind my swings growing exponentially. Ian barely managed to parry, his arms buckling under the increasing force. His flames lashed out in retaliation, but I stepped around them effortlessly, my Lucent Harmony guiding my body with precise efficiency. His stance weakened. His speed waned. He realized too late. I wasn't fighting at my full strength. "Damn it," Ian growled, fire exploding from his limbs as he leapt back, putting distance between us. His chest rose and fell, his breathing heavier than before. His fingers twitched. His pupils contracted into reptilian slits. Draconification. Golden red scales bloomed across his arms, spreading like wildfire up to his shoulders and down his spine. The air thickened, his mana surging into something almost primal. His jawline sharpened, his teeth elongating slightly. And then his wings sprouted. Not physical ones. Mana wings, translucent yet majestic, shaped from pure flame and surging heat. Ian grinned, his aura vastly different from before. "You're good," he admitted. "Too good. So, I'll stop holding back." I exhaled. "Go ahead." The ground cracked beneath him as he launched forward, a swirling pyroclastic storm roaring to life around him. Legend of Prominence. His grade 6 art. His first movement, Blazing Dawn. The sun itself seemed to rise within the stadium as flames burst forth, a dazzling sphere of golden red fire coalescing in his palms before exploding outward in a roaring torrent. The sheer heat blurred the air, a miniature sun descending upon me. But I didn't flinch. My footwork shifted. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. Tempest Dance. I slipped through the gaps of his flames, my blade carving through the blaze, dispersing his inferno like parting mist. Ian growled, flipping backward before propelling himself high into the air. Second movement, Infernal Ascent. A dragon's roar echoed through the arena. The sky turned crimson as Ian's flames coiled around his body, spiraling upward in a violent surge. And then, he descended. Faster than before. A meteor of flame and fury. A single, cataclysmic strike meant to end the fight. My sword pulsed. Lucent harmony engaged. I stepped forward. 1, 2, 3. A full Tempest dance cycle completed. My final strike landed just before his did. Crack. His flames shattered. His form crumpled. And Ian Vizirian collapsed. Silence. Then, the roar of the crowd. The match was over. I exhaled, lowering my sword, looking down at Ian's dazed, breathless form. I told you, I murmured. You already knew the result. Underscore 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 underscore. Leon leaned forward, watching the replay of Arthur's fight with a sharp glint in his crimson eyes. The movement, the sheer efficiency of his strikes, it wasn't just talent, it was mastery. Hey, did he get that art in the academy? He asked, voice laced with intrigue. Yes, Valerie confirmed, arms crossed as she leaned back in her seat. Tempest Dance. A grade 5 art provided by Mythos Academy. Leon's lips parted slightly, his brows furrowing. So, he's only been practicing it for, 8.5 months? He turned to Valerie, as if waiting for her to correct him. How the hell is he this proficient? He's at least at the novice realm of mastery already. That, Lee Zenith said, amusement curling his lips into a smirk, is the bare minimum for him. With his talent, it's expected. Talent, Duke Blazespout mused, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. His gaze flickered to the screen where Arthur stood, victorious, his expression calm, unbothered. So you consider him superior to all of them in terms of talent? Lee hummed, tilting his head in consideration. In a sense, yes, he admitted, before adding with an air of mystery, and in a sense, no. Valerie's eyes narrowed. Explain. Lee leaned forward slightly, fingers drumming lazily against the armrest of his chair. There are many ways to define talent, but when it comes to combat, there are 3 primary classifications, he began, his tone smooth, instructive. The first is mana rank talent, the rate at which one absorbs and refines ambient mana, ultimately determining their growth in mana rank. Everyone nodded along, following the familiar logic. The second is mind aspect talent, talent in spellcasting, elemental affinities, and specialized magic fields. This is what determines a mage's peak potential. Paul Lucrian, the necromancer, stroked his chin, listening carefully. And finally, there is body aspect talent, the natural aptitude for physical combat, the ability to wield weapons, to push the body beyond limits. Lee paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Arthur's mana rank talent is exceptional, but not the best among Class A, he revealed. That made a few heads turn. Paul blinked. Wait, he said, raising a brow. But he's one of only 3 white rankers among the first years. If his mana rank talent isn't top 3, then how the hell is he keeping up? Did you all forget the 4th aspect? Lee smirked, eyes glinting with something knowing. Silence fell over the VVIP box. Then Valerie whispered, almost as if the realization had been pulled from deep within her mind. Soul aspect. Lee spread his arms in amusement. A way to bridge the gap in mana rank talent. Leon let out a slow whistle, realization dawning in his gaze. So desperation then, he muttered, intrigued. He didn't rise because his absorption rate is superior. He rose because he threw himself into hell. A madman's road, Duke Blazespout remarked, watching Arthur's calm, measured figure on the screen. Lee chuckled. Not a road, he corrected, eyes gleaming. A battlefield. Chapter 167, Sovereign's Tournament, 3. The crowd roared as Renkagu and Cecilia Slatemark stepped onto the grand stage. From the VVIP box, Valerie leaned forward, watching intently. This will be interesting, she murmured. Interesting? This is going to be one-sided, Leon scoffed, swirling his glass. Ren's a white ranker. Cecilia's still high silver. No matter how talented she is, the gap in mana density alone makes this unwinnable. Lee Zenith smirked. Perhaps, but never underestimate a witch. Down in the arena, Renkagu cracked his knuckles, his posture relaxed. His violet eyes gleamed with power, his god's eyes seeing everything, every twitch of Cecilia's fingers, every fluctuation of her mana, every micro-movement that betrayed her intent. Cecilia, in contrast, had a smirk on her face, the crimson crown of her witchcraft gift glowing faintly atop her golden head. The moment she stepped into the arena, her presence changed. The air crackled around her, thick with mana, as 4 intricate magic circles spun rapidly behind her. 4 circle magic. 4 spells. All active. All controlled. Most mages could barely juggle 2 spells in a battle. Cecilia could orchestrate 4. Ren tilted his head. You're confident. Cecilia's smirk widened. You're cocky. Because I've already won. You haven't won yet, Cecilia countered. Yes, I have, Ren replied simply, lowering his stance. Ren vanished. Cecilia's eyes barely registered the movement. One moment, he was standing before her. The next, he was simply gone, a blur moving beyond normal perception. Ren's foot slammed into the ground just beside her, and the entire arena shuddered as his collapsing step activated. The space around them compressed violently, a miniature gravitational implosion forming at the point of impact. The ground beneath him fractured, and the very air felt like it was being pulled into itself. Cecilia didn't have time to think, her instinct screamed at her, and she leapt backward, her magic circles spinning rapidly in response. 4 spells. 4 elements. 4 paths of survival. A wall of scarlet fire erupted in front of her, meeting Ren's attack head-on. But it didn't even slow him down. He didn't stop moving. Ren twisted his body mid-air, using the force of his own step to launch himself forward. His fist came blazing towards Cecilia's skull. Her wind barrier erupted just in time. Boom. The air detonated, sending shockwaves outward. The protective barrier held, barely, cracks running through its structure. Cecilia was already moving. She flicked her wrist, and her next spell, lightning magic, formed instantly. Bolts of raw electricity snapped toward Ren in rapid succession, guided with unnatural precision. Ren sidestepped, moving through the attacks as if they were slow motion. His god's eyes made dodging magic child's play. You're fast, Cecilia admitted. Ren smirked. You're slow. His fist blurred. Boom. The gravity-altered punch smashed into her spell circle. It should have shattered. It didn't. Instead, Cecilia redirected the force, her crimson crown glowing brighter as she twisted the very mechanics of the magic itself. The sheer impact was absorbed, dispersed into the very fabric of her spells. Ren raised an eyebrow. Clever. Cecilia grinned. That's not all, she whispered. A spell exploded behind Ren. A delayed detonation. It sent a wave of force toward him, an instant counterattack set in motion the moment he made his first move. Ren twisted mid-air, rotating his entire body with inhuman precision. Gravity magic bent around him, negating the force of the explosion in an instant. And then he was gone again. Cecilia's heart pounded. A shadow loomed above her. She looked up. Ren was already descending. His fist was no longer covered in simple gravity magic. No. This was something else. Event Horizon. The very fabric of space bent around his fist as he brought it down. A perfect execution of his grade 6 art, Void Fist. Cecilia's 4 spells all erupted at once, creating a shield of fire, wind, lightning, and earth. It wasn't enough. Ren's fist crashed into the barrier. Crack. The spells collapsed. The impact struck Cecilia's body. For a split second, nothing happened. Then. Boom. The ground beneath her shattered. The entire arena floor broke apart as the spell circles flickered violently, failing to sustain their structure against the sheer force of his attack. Cecilia coughed, barely standing, her body trembling. She was strong. But Ren Kagu was stronger. She knew it. And Ren knew it too. Give up, he said calmly, lowering his fists. Cecilia gritted her teeth. She wasn't a fool. She had delayed the inevitable, but she wasn't winning. Still, she hated surrendering. But her body was already giving out. She exhaled, straightened her posture, and raised a hand. I surrender, she said, her voice smooth but slightly bitter. The crowd erupted, cheering wildly as the match concluded. Ren's expression didn't change. He turned away. Not bad, he admitted before walking off. Cecilia, despite the pain in her bones, smirked. Not bad yourself, she muttered under her breath. And with that, the match ended. Underscore 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 underscore. Jean Ashbluff stepped onto the arena, his expression calm, his twin short swords resting easily in his hands. The air around him carried the faint chill of death, a silent whisper of his necromantic power. Across from him, Rachel Creighton's golden hair glowed under the stadium lights, her sapphire eyes brimming with unwavering determination. The golden aura of her saintess gift shimmered around her, a stark contrast to the eerie, spectral energy surrounding Jean. The announcer barely finished speaking before Jean moved. His foot barely touched the ground, yet he surged forward, vanishing into a blur of motion. Rachel's instincts screamed at her as she raised her hands, light magic coiling around her fingertips. A snap of her fingers sent a sphere of radiant energy hurtling toward him. Jean didn't stop. With an almost lazy flick of his wrist, one of his short swords intercepted the sphere, the dark mana surrounding his blade dulling the explosion upon contact. He closed the gap instantly, his second sword striking toward Rachel's ribs. A golden barrier flared into existence just in time. Jean clicked his tongue as his blade bounced off harmlessly. Instantly, he surrounded his body in the bones of his skeletons. The signature bone armor, a vital spell for necromancers in 1v1 situations where their summons won't be of much use. Jean continued attacking, bringing down his 2 short swords in a sharp, fluid motion. Rachel retaliated, her fingers tracing a rapid sigil in the air. A pulse of golden light erupted from her body, repelling him backward. She didn't stop there, her free hand conjured a second sigil, this one blooming into dozens of piercing light spears. Jean exhaled, his body shifting. Shadows curled at his feet, and in the next breath, he was gone. Rachel's eyes flickered, her senses sharpening. Jean was behind her. She spun just in time to meet his next strike, light coating her arm as she formed a hasty shield. The impact sent vibrations through her bones. He was fast, impossibly fast. "You're strong," Jean admitted as he slid back, the flicker of a smirk gracing his lips. "And you're persistent," Rachel responded, her hands already moving to form another spell. Jean didn't allow her the time. The moment his foot touched the ground, spectral wails filled the air, a chilling, mournful cry that sent shivers down the spines of those watching. His mana surged, coalescing into the next movement of his Grade 6 art, Wail of the Departed. A haunting mist spread through the arena, filled with the echoes of the lost. Shadows flickered in the corners of Rachel's vision, clawing at her focus, making her second-guess where Jean would strike from. A clever tactic. Rachel didn't flinch. She exhaled, gripping the pendant around her neck. The golden light that had always surrounded her burst into full radiance, banishing the mist with its sheer presence. Jean barely had time to react before a beam of pure light magic lanced toward him. He twisted, barely dodging as the heat of the spell seared past his shoulder. "Annoying," he muttered. Rachel smiled. "I get that a lot." Jean decided then that he needed to finish this quickly. The faint whispers of the dead curled around his weapons, a sign of his next move, phantom blades. His dual swords shimmered as afterimages of his strikes filled the space between them. Dozens of slashes that were both real and not, attacking from every conceivable angle. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she conjured her defense. Light expanded from her in a dome, an unbreakable bastion against the incoming onslaught. For a few agonizing seconds, it seemed neither would yield. Then, Rachel's lips parted in a whispered chant, and the light dome fractured, not in failure, but in transformation. The broken shards of golden energy didn't fade. Instead, they surged outward in countless blinding streaks. Jin's movements slowed just for an instant. And that was enough. Rachel gathered the last of her mana, forming a condensed spear of holy light. She threw it with everything she had. Jean barely raised his blades in time. The impact sent him skidding back, his feet digging into the ground, arms trembling against the force. The moment his stance broke, the stadium's magic flared, detecting his surrender to gravity, to exhaustion, to the inevitable. A buzzer rang. Rachel Creighton stood victorious. Jean let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Guess I lose." Rachel, panting, smiled. "Barely." Jean flicked his swords, the dark aura fading. "Next time, I'll win." Rachel only nodded, her sapphire eyes gleaming. "I'll be waiting." Chapter 168, Sovereign's Tournament, 4. The quarterfinals had ended, and the results had played out as expected. Dark mana, for all its infamy and power, was still second to light mana in raw, destructive potential. Jean had fought well, his necromantic arts giving him an edge in versatility, but Rachel had overwhelmed him. Necromancy required time to reach its true potential, and Jean had yet to fully tap into what made his gift so terrifying. Even with his bone armor enhancing his defenses and his dual-wielding finesse, there was simply no way he could outmatch Rachel's relentless barrage of light spells. The other matches had been less dramatic. As white rankers, Ren, Lucifer, and I had outclassed our opponents entirely. There had been no suspense, no real struggle, just overwhelming strength enforcing an inevitable outcome. But now, the semi-finals awaited. And things were about to get far more interesting. Lucifer Windward versus Rachel Creighton. A mismatch in almost every way. Rachel was a prodigy of light magic, her gift placing her above nearly every other light mage in our generation. But Lucifer was something else. A walking cheat code. His yin-yang body wasn't just powerful, it was unnatural. If Rachel managed to put up a fight, it would be a testament to her skill, but no one seriously believed she could win. Then there was my match. Ren Kagu versus me. Ren had grown terrifyingly strong. If Lucifer was a cheat code, Ren was a living algorithm, his god's eyes breaking down every movement, every fluctuation of mana, every shift in an opponent's stance with surgical precision. I had sparred with him before. I had lost to him before. But I had also changed since then. For the first time in this tournament, I was going to have to fight seriously. There was a break before the semi-finals, enough time to rest and recover so that the matches the next day would be at full intensity. Rachel, positively glowing with excitement, wasted no time in finding me. Before I could say a word, she wrapped her arms around me, squeezing tightly. "Well," she beamed up at me. "Aren't you going to praise me?" Her golden hair shimmered under the soft artificial lighting, and her sapphire eyes sparkled with something both fierce and playful. It was impossible not to smile. "You did well," I said, resting a hand on her head and ruffling her hair slightly. She turned scarlet and quickly stepped back, pretending to fix her hair, but the upward curve of her lips betrayed her flustered happiness. Cecilia was smirking from the sidelines, arms folded. "Well, Nightingale? Gonna avenge me against Ren?" Her tone was casual, but I could hear the undercurrent of competitiveness. Even in loss, she was unshaken, as confident and teasing as ever. "I'd expect nothing less," I replied, meeting her gaze. Serafina, standing a little behind, simply gave a small nod. Her silver hair, as ethereal as ever, caught the light as she looked at me, her expression as unreadable as always. "You fought hard," I told her. Her gaze softened, and she gave me the smallest smile before waving slightly and stepping back. With the day's fights over, I made my way to the hotel where my family was staying. Mythos Academy had made sure that the families of participants had top-class accommodations, and the place had an air of luxury without being excessive. As soon as I stepped inside, my mother pulled me into a warm embrace. "Arthur, you did so well." A high-pitched voice chimed in immediately after. "Yeah, you actually won against the Dragon Prince." "Thought you were gonna get barbecued," Arya added with a mischievous grin. I snorted. "Glad to see you have faith in me." "We are proud of you, Arthur," my father said, his voice filled with quiet pride. I let the warmth of their presence settle in. This world had been strange, dangerous, and full of challenges, but moments like this reminded me that some things, family, support, love, remained the same, no matter the circumstances. I caught up with them, enjoying the rare moment of peace before the real battles began. Underscore 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 underscore. Rachel stretched her arms above her head, letting out a slow sigh. "I was surprised you didn't smother him, Cecilia," she teased. "Were you that down after your match?" Cecilia huffed, crossing her arms. "Perhaps," she admitted easily, throwing Rachel off guard. Rachel blinked, her usual sharp retort stalling on her tongue. Well, did you really think you could beat Ren?" "Of course not. I'm not stupid," Cecilia said flatly. "It's just Arthur got so damn strong." Rachel let the words settle in the air. It wasn't just strong, Arthur had grown into something that defied sense. He had always been talented, but the way he climbed higher, step by step, without ever hitting a true wall, it was something that made even the prodigies around him pause. For the first time, she could actually hope, truly hope, that he had a chance against Lucifer. "You still think Arthur will win, right?" Rachel asked. "Of course," Cecilia answered, her voice unwavering. But her expression flickered, the confidence not quite reaching her eyes. They both believed in him. With their hearts, they did. But their minds whispered doubt. Because Lucifer was a different kind of monster. He had never gone all out. The gift he carried, Yin Yang body, was an existence of its own. Most gifts, no matter how powerful, followed a basic pattern. They were supernatural abilities, but still bound by the limits of their wielders. Lucifer's, though? His was something else entirely. His gift had 3 stages. Most of the time, he only operated in the first, its passive effects enhancing his martial talent and physical prowess. During the second practical evaluation, he had activated the second stage. Against Seraphina, he had shown only a sliver of the third. And that was all it took to crush her. Rachel tightened her fists. Arthur was strong. He was strong in a way that shook the foundations of everything she understood. White star. Black star. A lich, even suppressed. He stood at the same mana rank as Lucifer, and yet Lucifer still felt like a wall. Cecilia broke the silence first. And you're going up against him next. Rachel pursed her lips, inhaling sharply. Lucifer was her childhood friend. But she had never liked him. Because he was the first person who made her feel powerless. They call all gifts supernatural abilities, Rachel muttered, her voice quieter now, bitter. But his gift, no, his very existence is supernatural, by its very being. As if it's normal. Cecilia didn't answer. She didn't have to. She understood. Rachel exhaled slowly, shaking her head. But I'll fight anyway. Even if I can't win. Cecilia looked at her, the teasing glint in her eyes replaced with something deeper. I don't want Arthur to be my savior, Rachel continued. I don't want to be a damsel in distress while he does all the fighting. Even if I can't beat Lucifer. I want to be strong on my own. She lifted her chin, sapphire eyes steady. And I will be. Chapter 169, Sovereign's Tournament, 5. Today was the day. The day of the semi-finals. And the first matchup was mine. Lucifer Windward versus Rachel Creighton. To the world, it was an inevitable conclusion. The second hero against the Saintess. A preordained victory. A battle where I was supposed to shine briefly, gracefully, before succumbing to the natural order of things. Nobody expected me to win. Not because I wasn't strong, I was. But because Lucifer was simply stronger. His mana rank towered above mine. His swordsmanship was refined beyond mine. His gift was an anomaly, the power to wield what no human should possess, black mana and white mana, chaos and order, the perfect balance of existence itself. But I didn't step onto this stage for them. I wasn't fighting for their expectations. I climbed the stairs to the battlefield, my hands steady, my breath even. Opposite me stood Lucifer, the Prince of the North, golden hair catching the artificial stadium lights, verdant eyes watching me with something that felt frustratingly close to fondness. His gaze was expectant. Not nervous, not wary, expectant. He thought he already knew how this fight would end. Begin, the announcer called. Wings of light erupted from my back, their golden glow illuminating the stage. I felt it immediately, the weight of my mana, the crushing power of my Saintess gift surging through me, reinforcing my very existence. This was the power of order. The power of the Saintess. 4 circle spells manifested at my fingertips, light arrows forming in an instant, humming with the raw force of purified mana. I fired them all at once, a storm of golden streaks hurtling toward him. Lucifer didn't even blink. The next moment, my arrows vanished, swallowed by an expanding 5-circle spell. A 5-circle spell. He hadn't even moved, just let his mana do the work. Ratch, his voice was carried by mana, a whisper meant only for me, smooth and gentle, as if he were asking me to dance rather than fight. I don't want to hurt you. Let's end this nicely, okay? I chuckled. Lucifer never understood. Those verdant eyes of his, always full of expectation, always dictating how things were supposed to be. They were the eyes of someone who had already written the script of my life before I even stepped onto the stage. They saw me as the Saintess. Not as Rachel. My grip tightened. I formed a light lance, its brilliance sharper than steel, and hurled it toward him with all the force I could muster. Lucifer sighed. He sighed. As if my efforts were beneath him. He extended his hand, and in the space between us, a shimmering orb appeared. Not light. Not darkness. White mana. The unnatural construct of his gift. A power that didn't belong in this world. The moment it touched my lance, my attack crumbled to dust, unmade, erased from existence as if it had never been there in the first place. I gritted my teeth. My gift allowed me to amplify my light mana, to bring divine power into form through sheer force of will. Cecilia's gift transformed spells, fusing them into crimson chaos. But this was beyond that. Lucifer's gift didn't augment. It didn't refine. It created. It was something outside the natural order. And yet, I spread my wings wide and pushed forward, light bursting beneath my feet as I launched myself toward him. Lucifer barely moved, his sword lazily raising to meet me. I fired another barrage of light arrows mid-air, twisting the very photons around me to guide their path. Again, his white mana expanded. Again, my attacks dissolved. I landed hard, skidding backward as I reinforced my body with mana, pushing past the sharp sting in my muscles. You always do this, I muttered, wiping sweat from my brow. Lucifer cocked his head. Do what? Decide how things will go before they even happen. I launched forward again, forcing mana through my circuits at a reckless speed. If precision wouldn't work, then overwhelming force would. I struck. Lucifer blocked with ease, his sword barely shifting. But I wasn't done. I struck again. And again. And again. Each impact sent sparks flying, each clash of metal against mana pushing me further past my own limits. Lucifer's expression remained calm, measured, as if this were nothing but a sparring session. He was holding back. I hated that. Light erupted from my entire body, my circuits burning as I poured everything I had into one last strike. My wings flared, my entire being becoming a beacon of radiant energy. Lucifer's eyes widened. For the first time, he moved. He slashed his sword downward, releasing another wave of white mana. I met it head-on. For a brief moment, just a fraction of a second. My light didn't disappear. Lucifer staggered back, his grip on his sword tightening as his white mana wavered, disrupted for the first time. For the first time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a win. But it was enough. I fell to my knees, my vision swimming, my body barely responding. I could hear the announcer's voice, the roaring of the crowd, but none of it mattered. Lucifer was staring at me. His verdant eyes, always so calm, were wide with something close to disbelief. I let out a breathless chuckle. Did I surpass it? I whispered. Lucifer didn't answer. For the first time in his life. He didn't know. I was half carried, half dragged off the stage by the medical staff, my limbs aching, my head ringing. Every muscle protested, but I barely noticed. Because I was happy. I had done it. I had shattered the cage. The Saintess. The ever-dutiful, ever-benevolent Saintess, destined to stand behind Lucifer, to heal, to support, to love him. That was the role carved out for me since birth. A path paved in gold, but it was still a path I never chose. And today, I had broken free. Arthur told me once, he didn't want me as his Saintess. He just wanted me as Rachel. But I couldn't do that, not entirely. Because I did want to be his Saintess. I wanted to be his light. I wanted to heal his wounds, to fight beside him, to make sure he was never alone. I wanted to be the one standing next to him, not as some divine title, but as someone who chose him. And it wasn't about whether he won or lost against Lucifer. That didn't change anything for me. But at the same time, God, I still wanted him to win. The moment I saw him waiting for me, standing there at the edge of the medical station, that calm, confident smile on his face, something inside me steadied. "Rachel," he said, his voice steady. "You did well." His words wrapped around me like warmth against the cold. "Don't worry," he continued, his blue eyes alight with something fierce. "Tomorrow, I'll end it." I believed him. And yet, even though I had just convinced myself that winning didn't matter, I still wanted him to win. Maybe I wasn't the perfect saintess after all. Chapter 170, The First Heroes Clone, 1. The first semi-final ended in a way everyone expected, and in a way no one did. Lucifer won. That much was inevitable. The child of prophecy, the destined victor, the shining prodigy of the North. He stepped into the ring, and he left as he always did, unshaken, unchallenged. And yet, Rachel had stood against him. Not merely fought, not merely struggled, stood. She had shattered the limits imposed on her, reached out and seized power beyond what should have been possible. Her light had clashed against his, and for a brief, impossible moment, she had almost overwritten his order with her own. She had nearly forced her way to white rank, and even though she lost, she proved something that no one had dared consider before. Lucifer wasn't untouchable. Which meant now it was my turn. Renkagu was waiting for me in the second semi-final, and I could already feel his eyes on me from across the arena. In my past life, the readers of Saga of a Divine Swordsman had given him a fitting title, the First Heroes Clone. And for good reason. His fist arts were unparalleled. His triple affinity, gravity, space, and time, was an absurd combination only seen once before in history. And his gift, God's eyes, made him a prodigy so terrifyingly efficient it was almost unfair. Born with every talent the Kaga family could offer, he was the culmination of their bloodline. During the midterms, I had barely defeated him. And that was with more luck than I liked to admit. But today was different. Today, there was no luck. I glanced up at the VVIP box, where Lee Zenith sat, watching. My master. The man who had trained me in Mount Hua, who had seen my talent firsthand. I smiled. Because today, I would prove him right. I would become the sovereign. "Begin," the announcer called. Ren exhaled, shifting into his stance. His violet eyes glinted like amethysts under the stadium lights. His right foot slid back, his left fist rising, the space around him distorting as if the very air bowed to his presence. A fraction of a second later, a gravity well detonated toward me. The weight of the world slammed forward, pressing down with enough force to crush bone. I raised my sword. Luna's sigils flared to life along my arms, silver light pulsing as I met the incoming pressure head-on. Dark mana surged from my blade, cutting through the gravitational force, scattering it into harmless tendrils of energy. Gravity, space, and time were considered some of the most powerful affinities in existence. But there was a reason they weren't the strongest. Because dark and light mana, the primordial forces, countered them completely. Ren's lips curled into a smirk, his violet eyes gleaming as they analyzed me. God's eyes. A truly terrifying gift, one that made raw talent and years of training seem almost meaningless. Information flooded into his mind at every moment, turning combat into a puzzle already solved before the first move was even made. He didn't just see my movements, he saw through them, calculating every angle, every reaction, every possible outcome. So, with all the certainty of a man who had never once doubted the results of his own vision, he moved. The first movement of Void Fist, collapsing step. Space itself warped around him. A ripple in the air. A shift in the axis of reality. And then, he was upon me, his fist coated in gravity magic, aiming to fold me into the ground with sheer overwhelming force. I raised my sword, its dark aura rippling as I instinctively traced a 5-circle dark spell along the blade. Steel met flesh. No, not flesh, something denser, something that bent reality. His gravity-infused strike crashed against my blade like a collapsing star. And yet, I met him. His body moved again before the first impact had even finished, adjusting, correcting, adapting. His eyes read me like an open book, already flipping to the last page before I'd even started the next chapter. In a battle like this, fought on raw calculation alone, I could barely keep up. God's eyes were overpowered in a straightforward fight. Supernatural power surpassing typical mana laws. Which meant there was only one way to counter it. A supernatural power of my own. I let my black star awaken, and dark mana poured out like ink spreading through water, swallowing every trace of light in its path. Lucent Harmony wasn't a true gift for dark mana, but it was enough. More than enough. The battlefield shifted. His fist met my sword again, and for the first time, he hesitated. His eyes narrowed. The perfect calculations, the flawless predictions, they stuttered. The second movement of Void Fist, Event Horizon. I felt at the moment it activated, time, space, and gravity intertwining to create a movement that reflected the event horizon of a black hole itself. He struck, certain of the result. And he missed. What? Ren muttered, the barest flicker of confusion crossing his usually composed expression. He adjusted mid-strike, his instincts flawless. His fist redirected, shifting his trajectory to compensate for the error. His mind worked at lightning speed, trying to decipher what had changed. Wrong, I whispered. My sword carved through the space between us, catching him at his side, just the shallowest of cuts before he disengaged, pushing back before I could press the attack further. For the first time since this fight had begun, Ren's smirk faltered. Underscore 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 underscore. Incredible, Paul murmured, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression unreadable. His control over dark mana, it's beyond anything I expected. Dark mana was an enigma, an absence of light, a void that disrupted perception and clouded senses. Against most opponents, it was a perfect counter. A clever manipulator of dark mana could slip through blind spots, distort awareness, and turn even the most honed instincts against their wielder. But Renkagu did not rely on mere instincts. His god's eyes were supernatural, a gift that transcended the limits of perception. They didn't just see, they understood. No illusion, no trick of light or absence thereof, could fully deceive him. And yet, Arthur was managing it. Kem sat in silence, his fingers idly tapping against the armrest of his chair. His lips were pressed into a thin line, his gaze sharpening as he analyzed every minute shift in the battlefield. That's a good counter, he admitted at last. He didn't sound pleased about it. Even if it's not perfect, it's working. The fact that it worked at all was already absurd. Ren's gift made him untouchable in combat, a human cheat code that allowed him to predict, react, and dismantle any opponent before they could even think of striking back. That Arthur had found a way to partially obscure his sight, let alone gain the upper hand, was something no one had considered possible. Of course, Lee Zenith interjected smoothly, reclining in his seat with a knowing smile. Arthur isn't relying on just this to win. This is merely a prelude. The other VIPs turned toward him, sensing something in his tone. You'll see something far more shocking soon, he promised. Just keep watching. Down in the arena, Ren narrowed his eyes, frustration flickering across his face for the first time as he tried to lock onto Arthur's movements. He had expected Arthur to fight well. He had expected some challenge. But this? This was not what he had anticipated. Arthur moved in a blur, his sword flashing as he exploited every fraction of hesitation Ren showed. His strikes weren't wild, weren't aggressive. They were precise, methodical, each movement a piece of a larger picture only he could see. Ren's footwork shifted, his center of gravity lowering. His frustration didn't cloud his judgment, it focused it. Enough games, Ren muttered, his mana surging. Arthur just smiled. Finally taking me seriously? Ren didn't respond. The air around him warped. And then the ground beneath Arthur's feet collapsed. Chapter 171, The First Hero's Clone, 2. He was trying not to extend the fight. I could see it in the way the space around us folded and warped, constricting my movements, forcing me to engage on his terms. Ren knew his raw speed couldn't keep up with mine, so he was compensating. Rather than relying purely on reaction, he was shaping the battlefield itself, tightening the noose. The cracks of fragmented space shimmered, an invisible web designed to funnel me into limited paths. His control was masterful, the kind of precision that could only come from years of honing his god's eyes. But it wasn't enough. The dark mana shroud around me lashed out, carving through the broken space like a blade through silk. His defenses faltered for the briefest moment, and I seized it, my sword carving toward him. And yet, Ren reacted. His fist met my blade at the last possible instant, diverting the impact with just enough force to avoid being overpowered outright. He's not predicting me outright, I realized. He's waiting for my dark mana to clash with his space mana. The moment my mana disrupts his control, his god's eyes catches the break. His ability to process, predict, and react to patterns let him follow my movements just enough to keep himself from being completely overwhelmed. But that was the problem, he was just barely keeping up. If we had been equal in strength, his gift might have been enough to bridge the gap. But his space and gravity aura, no matter how refined, was losing. The moment my dark aura enveloped it, I could feel it buckling under the pressure. Dark mana was not merely the absence of light. If that were the case, it would be trivial to counter. But it was more. It was the weight of the unknown, the entropy of existence itself, the authority of oblivion pressing down on reality. And in this moment, it was consuming everything Ren threw at me. I stepped forward, driving my blade with another seamless movement, the power of my Tempest dance compounding with each strike. Ren shifted his weight, slipping past the initial cut, his fist glowing with warped gravity as he countered. Faster. He was adapting, but I was adapting faster. His next strike came with a shift in space, attempting to anchor me in place. But I was already gone, my aura eating through the threads of magic as if they were paper. I twisted mid-air, bringing my sword down with the accumulated force of each previous strike. Ren barely managed to cross his arms in time to block, but the force sent him skidding backward, the ground beneath his feet warping as he struggled to stabilize himself. I met his gaze. He knew it too. I was winning. Well, that was fun, I said, rolling my shoulders as the last wisps of dark mana flickered around me before dissipating. There was now a proper gap between us, the battlefield momentarily stilled, though the air between Ren and me crackled with tension. Ren's sharp gaze locked onto mine, his eyes gleaming with the eerie precision granted by God's eyes. He was waiting, analyzing, processing. His body was loose, relaxed even, but I knew better. That wasn't arrogance, that was calculation. Perfect. I smirked, exhaling as I let my black star fade, the oppressive aura of dark mana vanishing from around me. Ren's brows furrowed. What are you doing? I tilted my head, my smirk widening. Let's make this more interesting. The moment the last tendril of dark mana faded, I flipped the switch. Lucent harmony pulsed through me. My white star connected. A burst of brilliant light exploded around me. Mana surged, golden and absolute, washing over the battlefield in a cascade of radiance. The very air shimmered with the raw intensity of light mana flooding the space, blinding in its purity. Ren's body tensed immediately. His enhanced vision, normally his greatest strength, was now working against him. Light didn't obscure sight like darkness did. It didn't devour. It overwhelmed. For a fraction of a second, his pupils contracted, his irises flickering as he adjusted. A fraction of a second was all I needed. I launched forward. The ground cracked beneath my feet as I closed the gap between us in an instant, my sword lashing out in a clean diagonal arc. Ren moved on instinct, twisting his body to the side just in time to avoid the full brunt of the strike, but not fast enough to avoid the tip grazing his ribs. A thin line of blood bloomed across his side. I didn't stop. I twisted my blade, my body already in motion, my next strike flowing seamlessly from the last. Tempest Dance wasn't about brute force, it was about rhythm, about compounding momentum with every successive movement. Each motion built upon the last, chaining attacks together in a devastating sequence. Ren didn't retreat. He wouldn't. He stepped in instead, pivoting sharply and launching a brutal fist aimed directly at my jaw. I leaned back just in time, feeling the wind of his strike pass millimeters from my face, then retaliated with a downward slash. Ren's footwork was perfect, he twisted his body mid-motion, his fist slamming into the ground instead. The impact cratered the stone beneath us, shockwaves rippling outward. I adjusted, stepping back, but Ren wasn't done. His mana flared. Space twisted. I felt my footing shift unnaturally, my sense of distance momentarily warping. Gravity spiked around me, my limbs dragging with sudden weight. Ren's fist was already mid-swing, closing in on my ribs. First movement of his grade 6 art void fist, collapsing step. I exhaled sharply. I didn't resist the shift. Instead, I let my body flow with it. My foot glided across the ground as I twisted into the unnatural pull, redirecting my momentum rather than fighting against it. My sword snapped forward, slipping just past his strike, aimed directly at his exposed shoulder. Ren's eyes widened slightly, realizing his mistake a half-second too late. The blade connected, carving a shallow line across his shoulder before he wrenched himself away, flipping backward to create distance. I landed lightly, adjusting my grip, my smile widening. "Not bad," I said. "For someone who can see everything, you sure do get hit a lot." Ren wiped the blood off his shoulder with the back of his hand, his gaze unreadable. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something sharp. "Oh," he murmured. "Then let's fix that." I felt it before I saw it. A shift. The battlefield itself seemed to ripple, the very air becoming heavier. Ren's stance shifted. His muscles coiled. His mana deepened. His gift, God's eyes, was already monstrous. But now, he was using it at its full capacity. His movements would no longer be just calculated. They would be inevitable. I inhaled, my grip tightening on my sword. Perfect. I had been waiting for him to get serious. Ren's vision was faltering, his breathing growing heavier. God's eyes, his greatest weapon, his claim to the title of genius, was reaching its limit. He wasn't strong enough yet. Not fully. Not like Lucifer. Not like Arthur. The gift was powerful, but Ren hadn't surpassed the wall. Not yet. He could tap into its full potential for moments at a time, but prolonged use? That was beyond him. His body, his mind, his very mana reserve, none of them could handle it for long. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because now, it was my turn. My foot pressed forward, and with a single breath, God Flash came to life. A blur of movement. The first strike, a feint to the left. A flicker of hesitation from Ren. The second, an upward slash, forcing him back. By the third movement, the battlefield had changed entirely. God Flash wasn't just a technique, it was inevitability itself. Ren's body struggled to track my movements, his fists lashing out in precise counters that barely missed by millimeters. He was still fast, impossibly so, but the cracks in his perfect perception had started to show. His eyes, once sharp as a god's decree, were now lagging behind reality itself. He tried to compensate, activating collapsing step, the first movement of his grade 6 art, void fist. The space around him bent, distorting his positioning, his speed multiplying in an instant. But it wasn't enough. Chapter 172, The First Hero's Clone, 3. Ren's frustration spiked. He activated Event Horizon, his fists coated in warped gravitational distortions that bent the very air around them. A single direct hit would be devastating, but it was all or nothing now. His fists blurred, striking in a rapid barrage, but my sword danced between them. 1 miss. 2. 3. Then, the moment he needed to adjust his footwork, I struck. A horizontal slash, clean, decisive, and absolute. Ren's body staggered, his vision finally betraying him. His eyes twitched, his breath caught, and his knees buckled. The glow of God's eyes flickered once, twice, before fading entirely. I stood over him, my sword poised, the match already decided. Silence fell over the stadium. Ren's fists clenched, his jaw tightening as he let out a slow, frustrated breath. Then, he did the only thing left to do. He raised his hand. I yield. The declaration rang out like a bell, echoing across the stunned arena. I sheathed my sword and extended a hand toward him. Ren hesitated for a moment before sighing, his pride making way for something else, acceptance. He grabbed my hand, allowing me to pull him up. You bastard, Ren muttered under his breath. Since when did you? He stopped himself, shaking his head. TCH. Whatever. The announcer's voice boomed, snapping the audience out of their shock. Arthur Nightingale wins. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some whispered in disbelief, and in the VVIP section, some of the most powerful people in the world leaned forward in their seats, their interest piqued. I turned toward them, my eyes locking onto Lucifer's. One fight left. And I would not lose. Underscore 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 underscore. The 6 immortal rankers seated in the VVIP box found themselves caught in an unusual state of silence. It wasn't often that something truly unexpected happened in the world of the strongest, where every talent, every art, every rising star had already been measured, studied, and placed within an unspoken hierarchy. But this was something else. A student had created a grade 6 art. Not inherited, not gifted from a family lineage, not learned from an ancient sect. Created. What is this? Leon Vizirian finally muttered, his golden eyes sharp with something between astonishment and hunger. His fingers drummed against the armrest as he stared at the battle stage. A student? At his age? Lee Zenith exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. I told you, he said simply. You would see something special from my disciple. Very special, Duke Blazespout mused, his lips curling into a slow, approving smirk. The last time I saw something like this, it was the Martial King. Too soon to compare him to the Martial King, Kem Kagu interjected, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Perhaps not, Paul Locrian murmured, his dark gaze still fixed on the stage, as if trying to unravel the enigma that was Arthur Nightingale. And yet, something still doesn't add up. They all knew about Arthur's Lich. The single most impressive necromantic creation in the past century. And yet, he hadn't used it. Why? It must be the dual mana restriction, Valerie said, leaning forward, piecing it together faster than the rest. His new art is based on light mana. His Lich requires dark mana. Paul nodded, realization dawning. Of course. Since his white star and black star cannot coexist, he cannot activate both at the same time. A self-imposed restriction. Interesting. Lee didn't comment. He didn't need to. His dark eyes never left Arthur as the young swordsman stepped off the stage. Because despite all the brilliance, all the talent, all the mind-breaking feats that Arthur had already shown, the real question had yet to be answered. Who would win? Lucifer Windward or Arthur Nightingale? Even I cannot tell, Lee admitted to himself. There was an unpredictable element to gifts, an unknown variable in any battle between those who wielded them. The raw power of Lucifer's yin-yang body, the mystery behind Arthur's unnatural rise, either could tip the scales. The arena was silent for only a moment longer before the roar of the crowd erupted once more, the world itself holding its breath for what came next. Outside the VVIP box, the students were watching in stunned silence. Rose's fingers curled against her sleeves, her lips parted slightly. Incredible, she whispered. She had always known Arthur was strong. But this was something else. Dominance. It wasn't just that he won. It was how. Like the very moment he decided it, the entire battle shifted in his favor. Renkagu, the boy everyone had thought untouchable, the one blessed with the same talent as the great hero who had slain the heavenly demon, had been left grasping at shadows. And Arthur had done it without his lich. Without his god flash. Without the full extent of what he could do. He'll do it. Cecilia's voice cut through the silence, smooth, confident. A slow smirk tugged at her lips. He'll surpass it. Serafina didn't say a word. But the way her fist clenched at her side spoke volumes. And Lucifer, he simply turned away. He walked, slow and measured, his face unreadable. He didn't stop. Not until he reached the medical wing. Inside, Rachel lay on the bed, still recovering, her breathing even but her body weak from her earlier battle. The medical staff scrambled as soon as they saw Lucifer enter, their heads bowing low in respect. Your Highness. Lucifer barely acknowledged them with a flick of his fingers. Leave us. They obeyed without hesitation, filing out of the room, leaving the two of them alone. Lucifer's verdant eyes studied Rachel. He took in the way she looked at him, not with admiration, not with warmth, but with steady, unwavering certainty. He exhaled. I see. Rachel tilted her head. See what? I see why you did something so reckless. His voice was as smooth as ever, but there was something colder beneath it. It was because of Arthur. Rachel didn't flinch. Yes. Lucifer's lips pressed together. And it wasn't reckless, she continued. I surpassed it, didn't I? Lucifer didn't respond. Instead, he said something that made her heart pause in her chest. I'll just crush him, then. Rachel inhaled sharply. Then you'll be my Saintus again, right? There was no question in his voice. No arrogance. No anger. It was simply a statement. A fact. Rachel stared at him, her mind racing. He wasn't saying this out of love. It wasn't an obsession. It was expectation. Because Lucifer was the hero. And the hero had a Saintess. The hero had an arch-witch. The hero had a swordswoman he could trust with his back. That was how the world was supposed to be. Arthur had broken that. And Lucifer, unable to process it, was trying to put things back into their rightful place. Rachel took a breath. Then another. And she let it out. No. Lucifer blinked. Just once. Rachel's sapphire eyes shone like glass in the medical room's artificial light. I don't care if Arthur wins or loses, she said, her voice steady. I am his. Lucifer's expression wavered, just a fraction, but it was there. You must be my Saintess, he said again, slower this time, as if she simply hadn't understood. I refuse. Silence. A beat. I am Arthur's. Lucifer's verdant eyes darkened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. And for the first time in his life, something inside him cracked. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was Lucifer Windward. The second hero. The one chosen by prophecy. He was meant to defeat the coming threat. To stand above all others. To save the world. Rachel was meant to be at his side. But she wasn't. Lucifer's mind blanked. He couldn't comprehend it. The world, the very structure of it, was tilting, wrong, uneven, unstable. So he latched onto the only solution that made sense. I'll kill him, then. Rachel's breath caught. What? Lucifer took a step forward. If I kill him, who will you latch onto? Rachel shot up from the bed. Have you lost your damn mind? No, Lucifer said, and for the first time, there was something sharp beneath his voice. Not anger. Not rage. Something more desperate. Something that shouldn't exist within Lucifer Windward. I'm fixing it. Rachel felt the hair on her arms rise. Lucifer's eyes were eerily blank, as if he wasn't looking at her, but through her, past her, at something only he could see. I am the hero, he whispered. I am the savior of this world. Rachel's heart clenched. This was what it had done to him. The prophecy. The weight of expectation. The belief that everything in the world had already been decided. That he was meant to win, meant to lead, meant to stand at the peak. And Arthur had broken it. Rachel exhaled. Her fingers curled at her sides, but she forced them to relax. She met Lucifer's verdant eyes, calm, unwavering. If you kill him, she said softly, I will make sure you die, too. Lucifer flinched. Rachel smiled, slow and razor-sharp. You want to be the hero so badly, she whispered. Then try. Try to kill him, Lucifer. A slow, creeping chill settled into the room. Because you won't be able to. Lucifer didn't move. Didn't breathe. Rachel's voice was almost gentle as she continued, her words slicing like a scalpel. That talent of yours, the one you've always relied on? It's going to fail you. Lucifer felt something deep in his gut twist. You will fall, Rachel said. And for the first time in his life, Lucifer Windward felt fear. Chapter 173, Divine Swordsman, 1. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Thousands of voices merged into a single, pulsing wave of sound, an ocean of excitement crashing over the arena. Banners fluttered in the wind, holographic projections displayed our names in blazing letters, and the sheer anticipation in the air was thick enough to taste. I ignored it all. The only thing that mattered now was the man standing opposite me. Lucifer Windward. The Prince of the North. The son of Arden Windward. The future divine swordsman. He was the protagonist of the work I had once read, the unrivaled genius, the one destined to stand above all others. But today, I wasn't just a spectator to his story. Today, I was going to rewrite it. I had fought Ren. I had measured myself against him and tested my limits. I knew now where I stood. And I knew that, even with Lucifer at full power, it was possible. I stepped onto the stage, the bright sunlight glinting off the polished stone beneath my feet. The arena was vast, but in this moment, it felt small, as if the world had narrowed to just the two of us. Lucifer stood across from me, relaxed but alert, his piercing green eyes scanning me with cold calculation. His golden hair caught the sunlight, a halo of brilliance framing a face that was carved with the certainty of victory. I saw no arrogance in his gaze, no condescension. Only expectation. We both knew why we were here. This wasn't just another match. This was the match. Lucifer's hand went to his waist. Mine mirrored his. Two swords, two wills, two paths that had led us here. We unsheathed our blades at the same time. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, the world snapped into motion. I stepped forward, light on my feet, my sword held in a relaxed guard. Lucifer mirrored me, his posture loose, fluid. No wasted movements, no unnecessary tension. He was a swordsman forged through countless battles, refined by talent and training alike. I tested the waters first, a quick probing strike, my blade flashing toward his shoulder. A metallic clang. Lucifer's sword met mine with ease, his parry smooth, effortless. I adjusted immediately, stepping in and pressing forward with a second attack, this time aimed at his ribs. He countered just as fast, his blade twisting to deflect mine with the same casual grace. Our movements were fast, precise, fluid exchanges where neither of us committed too much, where every strike was met with equal resistance. A careful, delicate dance at the edge of true battle. I adjusted my footwork, pushing the tempo. A diagonal slash. Block. A feint to the left, a sudden flick to the right. Parried again. Lucifer remained unreadable. His defenses were impenetrable but lacked any real aggression. He was watching me, measuring me, learning me. I did the same. He moved with frightening efficiency, his blade control nearly perfect. But his movement patterns were methodical, practiced. Predictable in the sense that they followed a flawless rhythm. He wasn't using his gift. He wasn't using his elemental affinities yet. Neither was I. A test of fundamentals. A contest of pure swordplay. I adjusted my stance again, tilting my blade slightly downward, my grip shifting ever so slightly. Lucifer's eyes flicked to my hands, catching the change instantly. I dashed forward, aiming for his shoulder once more, only this time, my swing was sharper, the arc tighter. Lucifer responded as expected, deflecting the strike at the same angle as before, except my blade twisted at the last second, the momentum shifting. My sword slid past his guard, nicking the fabric of his sleeve before he danced backward, avoiding the full impact. A breath of a hit. But a hit nonetheless. Lucifer smirked. And then, for the first time, he attacked. His blade came at me like a bolt of lightning, a blur of silver cutting through the air with terrifying precision. I barely had time to react, twisting my sword to meet his, but the force behind it sent vibrations up my arm. He pushed forward again. I parried once, twice, each strike heavier, sharper than the last. He moved like a storm, pressing me with relentless attacks that forced me to step back, forced me to defend. A thrust to my chest, I pivoted. A quick slash at my flank, I ducked, countering with an upward swing. Lucifer's sword twisted mid-air, intercepting my strike with impossible speed. The rhythm changed. I wasn't testing him anymore. He wasn't testing me anymore. This was a fight now. A flurry of blows, our swords clashed in rapid succession, ringing out like a chorus of steel. Neither of us relented. The pressure built, footwork shifting, blades flashing as we moved faster, sharper, more precise. A feint. A parry. A counterattack. Every move met its match. Every strike answered. We danced along the edge of disaster, towing the line between control and chaos. I could feel it. He could feel it. The need to go further. To push beyond this. To use everything we had. Lucifer's green eyes burned, his sword held steady. I tightened my grip, my heart pounding. The real fight ignited like a star-going supernova. Lucifer didn't hesitate. The moment the match began, a violent surge of mana erupted from his body, ice and fire swirling together in perfect, unnatural harmony. The second stage of his yin-yang body. The very form he had used to decimate second years in the VR Mach War, the one that made him untouchable. The arena quaked from the sheer force of his release, frost spreading along the floor even as heat shimmered above it, warping the air. I inhaled. Luna. Her sigils flared to life across my arms, gleaming like constellations, as lucent harmony surged through me. The world sharpened, the threads of mana bending to my will. My body hummed with the alignment of affinities, magic becoming an extension of instinct itself. My black star remained dormant, this battle wasn't for it. But my white star blazed into existence. Lucifer's expression darkened as he saw it. In an instant, he conjured a 5-circle fire spell in his palm, the air around it crackling like dry leaves in a furnace. He hurled it forward, a comet of searing destruction. Spellcasting already? I thought. Mana pulsed as I invoked Laplace method, constructing a counterspell with ruthless efficiency. A 5-circle light spell erupted from my fingers, colliding with Lucifer's fire in a dazzling explosion of energy. For a heartbeat, the arena was bathed in blinding gold and crimson. And then, his spell shattered. My light magic carved through it like a divine spear, forcing Lucifer to react. He flicked his wrist, summoning ice in a desperate bid to intercept. The flame remnants barely had time to dissipate before jagged walls of permafrost rose between us, acting as both shield and weapon. Lucifer exhaled sharply. I saw it then. Not surprise. Calculation. The ice wasn't just a defense. It was his real attack. I moved. The air hummed as I sidestepped, just as a pillar of blue fire erupted from beneath where I had stood, hungry and merciless. He had layered the ice magic with another fire spell, using the obscurity of the frost to mask the buildup. Clever. But not enough. I twisted, landing in a crouch as I swung my sword in a precise arc. Light flared from the blade, slicing through the mist of frost and fire in a controlled explosion that sent shards of broken ice scattering like glass. Lucifer was already upon me. He descended from above, sword coming down with the full weight of his yin-yang body. White and black mana swirled around him in chaotic equilibrium, his entire form alight with devastating power. Our swords met in a blinding clash. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the arena floor. The force of it alone nearly buckled my knees, but I held firm, redirecting the momentum rather than absorbing it. Lucifer pivoted in midair, twisting to deliver a horizontal slash wreathed in fire. I ducked under it, countering with a rising cut aimed at his ribs. He parried with an ice-coated gauntlet, frost spreading over my blade before I shattered it with a burst of light mana. He smirked. I frowned. Fire licked at my side. I barely twisted in time, rolling across the ground as a crescent of compressed flame seared the air where I had stood a second ago. Lucifer pressed his advantage. He switched stances mid-motion, a blur of elemental destruction, striking with a mixture of raw strength and relentless precision. Every attack flowed seamlessly into the next, fire and ice bending to his will like an extension of his own body. I countered with loosened harmony, weaving between spells, redirecting force, meeting him stroke for stroke. But there was no denying it, his yin-yang body made him stronger than me, physically. His every swing carried the weight of a battle-hardened prodigy, and for all my talent, for all my training, I was still human. But that was fine. Because I wasn't done yet. Lucifer saw the shift in my stance and lunged forward, eager to break my rhythm before I could capitalize. His sword came down, a devastating vertical strike reinforced with both fire and ice, an attack that would have sundered a lesser opponent. I didn't dodge. I let the force of it come. And I caught it. Light exploded around me as I parried his full-powered strike, absorbing the force into my own momentum. My body moved instinctively, my feet already shifting into the first step of Tempest Dance. My blade flickered like lightning, striking, retreating, striking again. The technique compounded. Each movement built upon the last, speed and power doubling, then tripling, then quadrupling with every fluid motion. Lucifer's counterattacks grew more desperate. He blocked one strike but failed to keep up with the second. The third sliced past his defenses, forcing him back. The fourth made him stumble. The fifth sent him skidding across the arena floor. His pupils dilated as he realized what was happening. But by then, it was too late. Because I was already preparing the final step. Lightning crackled along my blade. Mana surged. And I took a breath. God Flash. Chapter 174, Divine Swordsman, 2. I abandoned the momentum of Tempest dance technique the moment I felt the shift in Lucifer's stance. If I pushed forward now, I'd be walking straight into his counter. The moment he executed a grade 6 movement, all the energy I had built up would collapse like a house of cards. So I switched to God Flash. The world blurred. A sonic boom echoed behind me as I vanished, reappearing in front of Lucifer at hypersonic speed. The sheer force of my acceleration warped the air, the ground beneath me fracturing from the pressure. Lucifer's response was instantaneous. He shifted into the second movement of Myth of the Northern Peak, Northern Gale. A violent storm of ice and wind erupted around him, laced with raw destruction. A better choice than his first movement, but still not the right one. Light clashed against frost. My longsword met his, and his wintry mana shattered beneath the brilliance of my attack. The moment my light touched him, I saw the grimace tighten on his face, his verdant eyes flashing with irritation. Then, boom. I barely had time to retreat before the explosion of force sent tremors through the arena. I skidded back, my boots digging furrows into the stone, my body thrumming with the sheer impact of the clash. What a monster. Even with God Flash active, even with me moving faster than the eye could track, Lucifer had managed to stop the worst of it. His yin-yang body had negated much of the damage, keeping him standing. Still, he had lost the exchange. Why? When two martial arts techniques clashed, the victor was determined by three factors: synergy, mastery, and the sheer amount of mana infused into the strike. Lucifer and I were equal in mastery. The mana infused? Near identical. That left synergy. And Northern Gale was the wrong choice against God Flash. Lucifer had tried to meet speed with sheer destructive force, but that wasn't how God Flash worked. My technique didn't simply rely on overwhelming power, it was about flow, momentum, piercing through weakness. His Northern Gale had given me too many openings, too many paths through his defenses. Lucifer exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as if testing the damage. Underscore 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 underscore. The air around them crackled as swords met once more, light and darkness clashing in a maelstrom of raw, unfiltered power. Arthur pushed forward, each strike of God Flash a relentless surge, faster, stronger, building with each exchange. Lucifer met him blow for blow, his sword flickering between black and white, countering each strike with a precision that would have shattered any lesser opponent. But Arthur wasn't any lesser opponent. Lucifer's stance shifted. A subtle thing, barely noticeable to most, but Arthur recognized it instantly. Lucifer was adjusting. His movements became sharper, more refined, the angles of his counters growing narrower, more exact. Arthur wasn't just fighting a powerful opponent, he was fighting an opponent who was learning, adapting with every passing second. Lucifer's eyes gleamed, and suddenly, the air froze. Arthur felt it before he saw it. The unmistakable weight of absolute cold, sinking into his bones. Lucifer's sword swept forward, coated in an ethereal frost that seemed to devour light itself. Frozen Zenith. Lucifer's third movement. A technique honed to perfection, not just an attack but an answer to overwhelming speed. The icy aura wrapped around his blade, a jagged corona of frost that slowed everything it touched. A perfect counter to God Flash. Arthur's blade met it, and for the first time, his momentum faltered. The sudden shift in temperature sent a jolt through his nerves, forcing his muscles to adjust mid-strike. His movements, which had flowed like an unrelenting tide, now met resistance, like wading through a frozen river. Lucifer pressed forward, his sword dancing with frost as he took control of the rhythm, shifting from defense to offense. Each swing of his blade left behind ghostly trails of ice, freezing the ground beneath them, turning their battlefield into a domain of crystalline death. But Arthur wasn't about to let go of the fight. With a deep breath, he activated loosened harmony even more, the silver sigils on his arms flaring. His mana surged, counteracting the oppressive cold, forcing his limbs to move despite the creeping frost. His sword flickered, and he resumed his assault, undeterred, carving through the ice with sheer willpower. They clashed again, the battlefield a symphony of shattered frost and burning light. Arthur's relentless offense continued to push Lucifer back. Even frozen Zenith, as masterful as it was, could only slow him down, not stop him. Lucifer's expression remained impassive, but Arthur noticed the slight furrow in his brow, the measured breaths between exchanges. Arthur was winning. He was forcing Lucifer back. For the first time, Lucifer Windward was on the defensive. And then, Lucifer's stance changed. Arthur felt it before it happened, the shift in pressure, the way Lucifer's mana coiled tighter, denser. A storm waiting to be unleashed. Lucifer exhaled, his black and white aura intensifying, condensing into something darker, heavier. The atmosphere grew suffocating, the gravity of his presence warping the space around them. And then, his eyes gleamed with something far more dangerous. Arthur's instinct screamed. Third stage. Lucifer Windward was done holding back. Underscore 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 underscore. Each strike that Arthur and Lucifer exchanged sent shockwaves rippling across the arena, the sheer force of their clash distorting the air itself. The ground beneath them cracked under the relentless pressure of their battle, yet only one of them was being pushed back. Lucifer Windward. The golden-haired prince of the north, the so-called child of prophecy, the undisputed rank one of the first years, was losing. In the stands, disbelief rippled through the crowd, murmurs swelling into open astonishment. Leon scratched at his unruly red hair, his golden eyes flickering between the arena and the projection screens above. "Hey, Phantom Reaper," he said, his voice half joking, half baffled, "this isn't some kind of illusion, right? You're not messing with reality again?" Valerie's brows furrowed sharply, irritation sparking in her black eyes. "Of course it's not, you idiot," she snapped. "Are you blind or just too dense to accept what's in front of you? Oi, you can't call me an idiot when you're younger than me." Leon shot back, his voice rising in protest as the two began bickering like old rivals. Duke Blazespout ignored their antics, his sharp gaze never leaving the battlefield. "Quite the unexpected development," he mused, his voice slow and measured. "Wouldn't you say, Masterly?" Lee Zenith, the young master of Mount Hua, did not immediately respond. His eyes were locked onto Arthur's movements, watching every shift of his stance, every micro-adjustment to his footwork. "Yes," he finally said, his tone calm, but beneath that, laced with something almost akin to disbelief. He knew Arthur was strong. He had trained the boy himself, had witnessed his monstrous talent firsthand. But even he hadn't expected this. Lucifer Windward was a once-in-a-millennium prodigy. The kind of talent that reshaped history. Even among Radiant rankers, even among the legends of today, none had reached his level of power at 16. And yet, the gap between Lucifer and Arthur was wider than anyone could have imagined. Just what was Arthur Nightingale? The Duke rested his chin against his palm, watching Arthur with an expression that was no longer merely interested, but invested. Then, something shifted. The air itself changed. A tremor passed through the battlefield, invisible yet undeniable. Mana twisted unnaturally, responding to something. A pressure unlike anything before pressed down on the arena. A presence that sent a ripple of silence through the audience, through the VVIP box, through even the strongest figures watching. Paul Locrian inhaled sharply, his usually impassive expression finally betraying something close to anticipation. "He's finally about to show it," he murmured. The others knew it too. Every gaze in the VVIP box locked onto the arena with razor-sharp focus. Because they were about to witness something rare. Something that defied normal classification. A true, proper supernatural ability. A gift. Not just one that enhanced reflexes or strengthened spells, no, a gift that birthed new types of mana itself. And for the first time in the match, Lucifer Windward smirked. Because it was time. To show the world the power that would make him the second hero. Chapter 175, Divine Swordsman, 3. When Renkagu formed his mana core at the age of 5, the world noticed. A prodigy, a force of nature wrapped in the form of a child, triple affinity, God's eyes, and an innate mastery of fist arts. It was the kind of talent that sent shockwaves through the superpowers of the world, the kind that made kings and emperors take pause. Because the prophecy had spoken. A second hero would be born. And so, the great powers turned their eyes to their own children, scrutinizing, testing, measuring. Each of them, Rachel, Cecilia, Ian, Jean, Seraphina, showed brilliance that outstripped even their radiant-rank parents. But no matter how high they reached, no matter how bright they burned, one name always stood above the rest. Lucifer Windward. Arden Windward had suspected his son was special. He had seen the signs, the effortless grace of his swordplay, the unnatural control over mana. But nothing could have prepared him for the day Lucifer awakened his gift. Black and white mana swirled around the boy, but Arden knew, this was not dark mana, nor was it light. It was something else entirely. A supernatural anomaly. Chaos and order, bound together in perfect opposition. In that moment, Arden understood. His son wasn't just a genius. He was an impossibility made real. A born swordsman, with unparalleled spellcasting talent. A force destined to stand at the peak. And now, standing on the stage of the Sovereign's tournament, Lucifer let that truth be known. His verdant eyes gleamed as he finally stopped holding back. Black and white mana surged, spiraling into existence like twin forces of nature, warping the very space around him. Chaos and order, creation and destruction, his gift in full bloom. This was the power of the yin-yang body. Lucifer wasn't arrogant. He acknowledged Arthur's talent. After all, Arthur had done the impossible, he had defeated Ren. But in the end, talent alone wasn't enough. Arthur could not win. Because they were born different. Lucifer stepped forward, ready to prove it. And then, Arthur smiled. Not a smirk. Not a bluff. But something genuine. "That's it, Lucifer," he said, his voice tinged with something close to glee. "Show me." Lucifer frowned. Why was he smiling? Why was he? Then, without hesitation, Arthur released Lucent Harmony. The space around them, once distorted, warped by the sheer force of Lucifer's chaos and order, began to calm. The raging storm of black and white mana met resistance, not through brute force, but through something deeper. A tranquility that radiated from Arthur, neutralizing the chaos. Lucifer's expression sharpened. Arthur Nightingale was not breaking under his power. No, he was thriving in it. Underscore 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 underscore. underscore 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 underscore. The clash between us was a storm of light and shadow, force and finesse. Lucifer's sword streaked toward me, the edge of his white mana humming with raw power. I twisted, sidestepping as his blade cut through the air where my ribs had been a moment before. He was fast, absurdly fast, but I had seen his style, studied the way he moved. The tempo of his swings, the way his weight shifted ever so slightly before an attack. I countered in the next breath, my sword darting forward, wrapped in a thin veil of white mana, a mimicry of his power. Lucent harmony thrummed in my veins, perfecting the balance between my body and mind, making each movement fluid, controlled. Our blades met, sparks of conflicting mana bursting in the air. White and black energy crackled against each other, sending violent ripples through the arena floor. The very air around us trembled from the sheer force of our strikes. Lucifer's lips curled into a grin, his verdant eyes glinting with exhilaration. His sword surged forward again, but this time he shifted mid-strike, switching from a straightforward thrust into a feint that twisted his entire stance. I saw it before he even finished executing it. With a slight pivot, I redirected his blade with the flat of mine, stepping into his guard. My fist struck out, a precise jab into his ribs, reinforced with my Tempest Dance technique. Lucifer barely managed to shift, absorbing some of the impact, but I felt the breath rush out of him as he staggered. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then vanished. He exhaled, shaking off the hit, and his stance deepened. Then, his mana changed. The white mana around him darkened, the pure energy bleeding into a deeper shade. My instincts screamed at me as a wave of pressure slammed into me, forcing my muscles to tense. My feet dug into the cracked floor, refusing to yield. Black mana. Lucifer's yin-yang body gift had finally revealed its true nature. I barely had time to brace before he lunged again. He was faster now. Faster than before. I met him head-on, my sword intercepting his in a shower of mana-infused sparks. Each clash sent shockwaves through the arena, the floor beneath us shattering under the force of our fight. He pushed forward, his strikes heavier, more aggressive, his black mana coating his blade in a vicious aura. I parried 1, 2, 3 attacks, then ducked as a sweeping horizontal slash nearly took my head off. I moved. Tempest Dance surged through me, my footwork becoming an intricate weave of movement, each successful dodge and counter fueling the next. Speed, momentum, power, each one compounding, layering, until my strikes became a relentless storm. Lucifer scowled, forced onto the defensive as my blade rained upon him. My attacks came faster, sharper, striking his sword at angles that disrupted his balance. He gritted his teeth and retaliated, twisting his body and driving his knee toward my gut. I spun, narrowly avoiding it, and retaliated with a downward slash aimed at his shoulder. He caught it at the last second, but the sheer force of my momentum sent him skidding backward. A hush fell over the arena. Lucifer Windward, the Prince of the North, the child of prophecy, was being pushed back at full power. His breathing was heavier now, his expression less composed. I wasn't just keeping up with him. I was winning. Lucifer exhaled sharply, shaking his head as if trying to clear the disbelief from his mind. His grip on his sword tightened. "You really are ridiculous," he muttered. Then, his black mana flared, the ground beneath him cracking under the sheer weight of his power. And I knew. The real fight had just begun. He took a deep breath and shifted into stance, his entire demeanor hardening. I knew what was coming. The movement he had used to counter my god flash. Third movement of the myth of the northern peak, Frozen Zenith. It was an impressive moment, no doubt. As the name implied, Frozen Zenith focused on channeling all ice energy to a singular, devastating point of impact. But Lucifer, ever the prodigy, had taken it a step further. He modified the movement, drawing not just on ice, but on every element at his disposal. It wasn't flawless, ice remained the dominant force, as the technique was inherently an ice movement. But that was the true ability of his yin-yang body, the seamless blending of opposing elements. "I want to do that," I silently asked Luna. She didn't respond, but the sigils on my skin flared in response, almost as if to acknowledge my intent. God Flash, absolute, it was an evolution of my original technique, superior in every sense. Faster, stronger, and deadlier. But there was a reason I classified it as a separate variant. The strain. To execute God Flash, absolute, I needed the full activation of Lucent Harmony, pushing both my body and mana reserves to their absolute limit. If Lucifer was going to unleash his full power, I would meet him with something far greater. Chapter 176, Divine Swordsman, 4. Lucifer's heart pounded as he funneled all his mana into the third movement of his Grade 6 art, Frozen Zenith. The air around him crackled with elemental power as the ice magic reached its peak, but it wasn't just ice. Lucifer's brilliance shone in the way he wove together the other elements, earth, fire, water, lightning, and wind, as well as his white and black mana, all combining to amplify the sheer destructive force of Frozen Zenith. Still, ice remained the dominant force, the bedrock of the technique. But as their blades neared, something shifted. In that split second, Lucifer felt it. Doubt. Arthur's presence, the overwhelming light aura enveloping his sword, made it clear, God Flash, absolute wasn't just an attack, it was a force of nature. The aura, focused and refined, was too precise, too sharp, too overwhelming. Despite the multi-elemental brilliance of Frozen Zenith, it paled in comparison to Arthur's movement. He's going to cut through it. The realization gripped Lucifer, his chest tightening as he felt his movement's limitations. He could see it, sense it. Arthur's strike was destined to slice through his multi-layered elemental defense as though it were nothing. I can't stop him. Instinctively, Lucifer poured more mana into the movement, desperate to gather the remaining elemental energy and fortify his attack. But deep down, a voice whispered. It's not enough. Arthur's light-infused sword descended with an unstoppable force, cutting through the combined elements of Frozen Zenith, the ice, the fire, the wind, all of it evaporated as if it had never existed. No. The moment stretched out, time slowing to a crawl, his thoughts spiraling into panic. This isn't how it's supposed to be. For the first time, Lucifer felt something foreign, a deep-rooted fear. The fear of losing. His entire life had been about triumph, about standing at the top, destined to surpass everyone. How could it all fall apart now? Not like this. His body screamed, and just as despair took hold, something shifted. Lucifer's vision blurred for a heartbeat, and then, clarity. His surroundings snapped into focus with a precision he had never experienced before. The flow of mana around Arthur, the sharpness of his strike, the subtle shifts in his movement, it all became painfully clear. What is this? He could see everything. The movement of the elements, the patterns of mana within Arthur's strike, the trajectory of his sword, it was all laid bare before him. His sight had transcended. But even with this newfound clarity, something was wrong. I can't keep up. He could see Arthur's attack, but his body couldn't fully react. It was still too fast, too devastating. His mind understood the attack's path, but his physical body lagged behind, not quick enough to counter. Yet, there was something else. Instinct. Lucifer's body, honed by years of martial training, responded in the only way it knew how. His eyes strained as he shifted his sword ever so slightly, the elemental energy of Frozen Zenith shifting just in time. It wasn't enough to stop Arthur's strike entirely, but it didn't need to be. Arthur's sword collided with the adjusted Frozen Zenith, the light aura carving through the elements with a brilliant flash. The force of the strike still overwhelmed Lucifer, but this time, it only grazed him, a shallow cut along his side instead of a devastating blow. He staggered back, the sting of the wound sharp but bearable. Blood trickled down his side, but he remained standing. Barely. Underscore 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 underscore. Gifts were one of the most widely used yet least understood phenomena in the world. Despite their prevalence, their true nature remained elusive, even to the most advanced researchers. There was some basic knowledge about gifts, of course. People knew that gifts granted extraordinary abilities, often allowing individuals to bypass the usual limitations of the power system. But how gifts accomplished this defied explanation and continued to baffle scholars. Still, research had uncovered a few key insights. It was understood that gifts could vary greatly in strength. Some were immensely powerful, while others were surprisingly weak. Gifts were often tied to bloodlines, like the Kagu family's legendary gift, God's eyes. Most individuals, however, couldn't unlock the full potential of their gifts until they reached ascendant rank. Only at that level did they truly begin to grasp the depth of what their gifts could do. One thing was absolutely clear among researchers: no one could possess two gifts. But of course, Lucifer Windward was the protagonist, right? I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that he was Earth's greatest blessing, the true hero destined to stand above all others. And in my arrogance, I thought I could defeat him, thought I could crush his pride. Now, I was being shown my place. God's eyes. Inarguably one of the most powerful gifts to ever exist. Scholars ranked it among the 4 greatest gifts in history: Yin Yang Body, Nirvana Flames, Empyrean Order, and God's Eyes. Simply put, it was an overpowered ability, perhaps even more so than Yin Yang Body, and it was the gift that had allowed Ren to almost surpass Lucifer in the original novel. And, as fate would have it, Lucifer's second gift was none other than God's Eyes, a supernatural ability once thought to be exclusive to the Kagu family bloodline. Lucifer's control over God's Eyes was still unstable, fickle at best, and overall, I was much stronger than him. But the real problem was the synergy between God's Eyes and Yin Yang Body. It wasn't enough that Lucifer was the only person in the world with 2 gifts, both of his gifts worked together with near-perfect harmony. With this combination, he could counter grade 6 movements without even using a grade 6 art of his own. And when he did activate his art, he could overwhelm his opponent completely. I had underestimated just how terrifying that power could be. Like how he had barely managed to counter my God Flash, Absolute, by adjusting the trajectory of his frozen zenith at the very last second. This wasn't good. The full activation of Lucent Harmony placed a heavy toll on my body, which was why I only used it when I intended to finish the battle. But now, not only had Lucifer survived my most powerful attack, he had unlocked his second gift, God's Eyes, just in time to keep up with me. On top of that, using the light magic variant of God Flash, Absolute had drained me more than I anticipated. Unfair bastard, I cursed internally, feeling the serene energy of Luna's will beginning to waver. Lucifer stood before me, a newfound confidence in his posture, his emerald eyes gleaming with clarity. He had found his footing again, and the power he radiated felt more focused, more controlled. He knew it too. Lucifer's grin widened as his confidence surged. The synergy between his 2 gifts, Yin Yang Body and God's Eyes, was unmistakable. He stood straighter now, his body moving with a fluidity that made his earlier attack seem almost clumsy in comparison. His emerald eyes locked onto me, glowing faintly as he assessed my every move. I could feel the weight of his gaze, sharper than ever. God's Eyes allowed him to track even the smallest movements of mana, analyzing my stance, my breathing, and even the subtle flickers of aura around me. With this newfound precision, He wasn't just relying on instinct or brute force anymore. He could see the paths of battle unfold before they even began. And I knew that. He raised his sword, the remnants of frozen zenith still swirling faintly around him, ice and flame coiling together in perfect harmony. The mana in the air crackled with tension, and I could feel his intentions even before he moved. But I wasn't about to back down. With a deep breath, I steadied myself. My body ached, the toll of activating Lucent Harmony wearing on me, but I couldn't afford to show any weakness. I tightened my grip on my sword, letting a new surge of mana flood my core. Lucifer shot forward in a blur, faster than before, and I barely had time to react. I swung my sword to meet his, but this time, there was something different. His movements were more precise, as if he could predict every counter I would make. Our blades clashed, the force of the impact sending sparks flying. I gritted my teeth, pushing back with everything I had, but Lucifer's newfound clarity allowed him to maneuver effortlessly around my defenses. He was in control now. "You've pushed me further than anyone ever has, Arthur," Lucifer said, his voice low but filled with that familiar arrogance. "But this is where it ends." His sword flared with ice and lightning, a deadly combination as he brought it down in a sharp arc. I dodged just in time, the blade grazing my side as I spun away, feeling the sharp sting of mana searing my skin. Chapter 177, Divine Swordsman, 5. The protagonist always has everything. The world bends for them, shaping itself around their victories. The tides of fate rise and fall at their whim. They stand undefeated, carving their way through every adversary, claiming the throne at the peak of all existence. The villain cowers before them. The beautiful girl, or girls, fall into their arms. And when they are about to lose, they don't. Because at that moment, the world itself shifts to accommodate their legend. A hidden power awakens. A destiny once buried resurfaces. The rules break, and balance shatters, because they are meant to win. Just like how Lucifer Windward had just unlocked his second gift. God's Eyes. The same ability Renkagu wielded. A power that transcended mortal vision, allowing him to see everything, every possibility, every flaw, every path to victory. The kind of ability that didn't just win fights but rewrote them before they even began. And I was just the extra. I was the one the story forgot, a footnote in the grand epic of Lucifer Windward. The one who struggled to keep up, who clawed his way forward while others walked gilded roads paved for them. I had done my part, hadn't I? I had pushed him to the brink. I had helped him grow stronger. So if I lost now, if I fell here, wasn't that just the natural conclusion? I should lose. I should let him win. The protagonist was always meant to win, after all. Arthur. A voice, distant but sharp. I closed my eyes. Was this how it was going to end? Was this where I finally accepted it? That no matter how hard I fought, no matter how much I bled, would always be second to him? Would always be behind? Would always be the extra? Arthur. A voice in my mind, growing louder now. No. I gritted my teeth. No. I wouldn't lose. I wouldn't let this story tell me what I was. Not again. I had lost before. I had lost everything before. And I had sworn never to let that happen again. Arthur. Luna's voice snapped through my consciousness, but I silenced her. I didn't need her right now. I only needed myself. Lucent harmony coursed through my veins, the serene power of balance and tranquility, so much like Lucifer's yin-yang body, yet wholly mine. And then, I did something that should have been impossible. I released my black star. Luna's warning rang in my mind, but I shut it out. Light and dark mana couldn't coexist. That was an unshakable law of nature. They repelled, clashed, annihilated each other upon contact. But they didn't need to meet. I guided them apart, dividing my mana circuits, weaving a precise dance between the two forces. My body became the battlefield, yet lucent harmony ensured neither side encroached upon the other. The impossible stood within me, light and dark, together. Lucifer's eyes widened. And I smiled. Erebus. A rift tore open in space, reality bending as my lich stepped forward. His oppressive presence surged into the battlefield, the cold grip of undeath radiating from his form. Even suppressed, his aura was suffocating. I exhaled. I could win. I would win. Because no matter what fate dictated, no matter what destiny claimed, no matter what this world thought I should be, I refused. I wouldn't be the extra in someone else's legend. I was Arthur Nightingale. And I was going to win. Let's do this, Erebus, I murmured, my grip tightening around my sword hilt. Use it. Erebus, his skeletal form unmoving, merely inclined his head in understanding. Without hesitation, he pressed the base of his Evernight staff against the shattered arena floor. The change was instant. The world twisted. A pulse of dark mana rippled outward, swallowing everything in its path. Shadows bled into the cracks of reality, stretching and warping like ink spilling into water. The sky above distorted, its once clear expanse consumed by an unnatural abyss. The brilliant floodlights illuminating the arena flickered, then failed. And just like that, the battlefield ceased to exist. Underscore 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 underscore. Lucifer exhaled sharply as his surroundings warped beyond recognition. The once solid ground beneath him felt off, as if it no longer adhered to the laws of reality. His senses stretched outward, probing the space around him. Then, his expression shifted. His god's eyes were failing. Lucifer stiffened, his pupils contracting as he processed the realization. The flow of mana around him was shrouded, his vision unable to pierce through the thick, cloying veil of darkness that smothered everything. He had seen this before, during his fight against Ren. Arthur had used dark mana to interfere with his god's eyes back then, rendering his predictive abilities sluggish, his battlefield awareness murky. But this was different. This was no mere suppression technique. This was absolute. Lucifer turned his head, his body tensed, trying to get a grasp on the altered landscape. But there was nothing. No sound. No light. Just an abyss, stretching infinitely in every direction. This isn't just dark mana. This is something else. Then, realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. A domain. He muttered under his breath. It shouldn't have been possible. Only immortal rankers were capable of conjuring domains, manifesting personal realms that bent the very fabric of reality to their will. It was a feat that required mastery beyond mortal comprehension, the crystallization of absolute control over one's essence. Arthur was nowhere near that level. And yet, here it was. Lucifer's fingers curled around the hilt of his sword, knuckles widening. If it wasn't a traditional domain, then there was only one explanation. A gift. Arthur had a second gift. Lucifer's breath caught, a flicker of disbelief flashing across his usually composed face. That was impossible. He was the anomaly. He was the one destined to stand apart, the child of prophecy. He alone possessed the right to wield more than one gift. Because he was the second hero. Arthur Nightingale couldn't be the same as him. He refused to believe it. The abyss pulsed again, shifting like a living thing. Lucifer clenched his jaw. No matter what this was, no matter what power Arthur had revealed, he would tear through it. He would not lose. That certainty burned in Lucifer's eyes, unwavering, absolute. This was not arrogance, not some fleeting belief in his superiority. It was the truth of his existence. He could not lose. That was why, as Arthur stepped toward him, wrapped in bone and shadow, Lucifer refused to believe what his eyes were telling him. "You're really using a lich like that?" Lucifer scoffed, his voice edged with both irritation and bemusement. Arthur, encased in crimson bones, merely smiled. The skeletal armor wrapped around him was eerie in its craftsmanship, each bone latticed together as if molded specifically for him. The mana radiating from it was dense, thick with necromantic essence. It wasn't a mere summon, it was Erebus, his lich, reforged into armor. It was crude, inefficient, but undeniably effective. "I don't have a choice," Arthur admitted, rolling his shoulders as the bone plates shifted with him, flexible yet unyielding. "I can't use Erebus' real abilities until I reach Ascendant rank. This is the best I can do for now." Lucifer clicked his tongue. A brute force approach. Disgusting. Arthur grinned, tapping the hilt of his sword against his armored shoulder. "And yet it's working." Lucifer exhaled sharply. Then, in a blur of motion, he was gone. Arthur barely had time to react before Lucifer was upon him, his sword descending like a judgment of light. The blade, wrapped in both white and black mana, carved through the air like a celestial executioner's guillotine. Arthur met it with his own strike, the impact sending out a thunderous boom as their blades clashed. The force cracked the arena floor beneath them, a testament to the sheer pressure they were exerting. Lucifer pressed forward, his strikes relentless. White and black mana coiled around his sword like twin serpents, intertwining and shifting seamlessly between offense and defense. Each swing was precise, measured, the product of years of discipline and mastery. Arthur didn't back down. Bone armor met blade, sparks flying as Arthur moved in sync with Tempest Dance, his footwork flowing effortlessly. Each step compounded his speed, his strength, his control, every successful deflection adding to the momentum of his counterattack. Lucifer scowled. He had fought many opponents, but Arthur's movements were something else entirely. He wasn't just reacting to Lucifer's attacks, he was adapting. Each exchange forced Lucifer to shift his rhythm, to adjust, to refine. And then, Arthur pushed. His next strike came with a burst of force that sent Lucifer skidding backward, his heels digging into the shattered ground. Arthur didn't let him breathe. He advanced, relentless, his sword cleaving through the air. Lucifer barely had time to parry before another strike came, then another, each one stronger than the last. Lucifer's pupils narrowed. He's building up power. With every movement, Tempest Dance was compounding his strength, his speed, his everything. Lucifer growled, shifting his mana. The balance tipped. White mana retreated, black mana consumed, and suddenly, Lucifer's sword was a streak of pure void, sucking in the light around it. Arthur's next strike met it head-on. A shockwave erupted from the collision, the air itself screaming as raw energy exploded outward. The arena walls, reinforced by Mythos Academy's best defensive spells, groaned under the strain. And then, Arthur vanished. Lucifer's eyes widened. He didn't vanish. He accelerated. Lucifer had been tracking Arthur's movements flawlessly, until now. Where? Light. Pure, blinding light. Lucifer's instinct screamed as he twisted, barely catching the glint of Arthur's blade just before. Flash. A streak of radiant energy carved through the air, splitting the battlefield in two. God Flash. The Grade 6 movement, executed with perfect timing. Lucifer had expected everything, but not this. Not while Arthur was bathed in dark mana. Not while Arthur had been fighting like a necromancer. Lucifer's body twisted midair as the sheer force of the attack ripped through his defenses, sending him flying. His feet slammed into the ground, carving deep trenches into the cracked stone as he struggled to stop himself. His grip on his sword wavered. His arms burned. What just happened? Arthur stood at the center of the battlefield, sword still raised, light mana fading from its edge. His breathing was steady. Controlled. Lucifer's heart pounded. I lost? The realization was bitter. He gritted his teeth, his body screaming at him to stand, to fight, to prove he was still the strongest. But he knew. Arthur had won. And the entire world had just witnessed it. Chapter 178, The Sovereign, 1. Incredible, Duke Blaespout murmured, leaning forward as his keen immortal-ranked senses cut through the swirling storm of dark mana that blanketed the battlefield. Even with the supernatural shroud that Arthur had conjured, Blaespout could see the precision behind his movements. He's using the gift of the Lich to cloak himself from Lucifer's second gift, effectively nullifying its advantages. And since he can't yet wield the full power of his Lich yet, he's refining it into an advanced bone armor, enhancing his physical capabilities just enough to break Lucifer down. A perfect adaptation, Valerie observed, her dark eyes sharp with interest. He's turned what should be a disadvantage into a tactical edge. His approach isn't just creative, it's ruthlessly efficient. What do you think, Paul? Paul Locrian sat in silent contemplation, his fingers steepled as his eyes remained locked onto the battle. His expression was unreadable, but the weight behind his silence spoke volumes. Then, finally, he spoke. I agree, Paul said, his voice quiet yet firm. Given the constraints, I cannot think of a better way to utilize a Lich. In the arena, the battle reached its climax. Arthur's movements, once calculated and methodical, now surged with overwhelming force. Lucifer, for all his prowess and divine potential, faltered under the relentless assault. Each clash of their blades, each burst of mana, sent shockwaves through the grand Colosseum. And then, Lucifer fell. A hush rippled through the audience as reality set in. The child of prophecy, the undisputed rank 1 of Mythos Academy, had been defeated. Leon exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disbelief. How the hell did he use a light mana movement in the middle of all that? His body was drowning in dark mana, but he still pulled it off. Paul's expression remained impassive, but his eyes gleamed with understanding. Because of the Lich, he explained. Arthur isn't controlling all of that dark mana himself. He's delegating the manipulation of it entirely to the Lich, keeping it separate from his light mana. Normally, maintaining such a fine balance should be impossible, but with his gift. The tranquility effect, Valerie finished, realization dawning. He creates harmony between forces that should repel each other. He isn't just wielding both dark and light mana, he's orchestrating them. Lee Zenith let out a slow, pleased sigh. A proud smile stretched across his face as he leaned back in his chair. As I thought, he mused. He won. But as he spoke, his eyes flickered to Kemkagu. The man's expression had twisted into something unreadable, his jaw tight, his fingers digging into the armrest of his seat. His white knuckles betrayed the storm brewing inside him. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. The space where he had been rippled, as if the very fabric of reality had momentarily distorted to accommodate his sudden departure. Down below, in the student stands, the reactions were far less composed. Ian Vizirian burst out laughing, slamming a fist against his knee as he leaned forward. Ha! He really did it. He beat Lucifer. His golden eyes shimmered with excitement. And Lucifer even unlocked a second gift, but he still lost. Beside him, Gene Ashbluff exhaled, folding his arms across his chest. I expected it, he muttered, but the way his fingers clenched his sleeves betrayed the tension he had been holding in. Still. Damn. Rachel's sapphire eyes were locked onto Arthur, standing amidst the shattered remnants of the battlefield. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't cheering. She was simply watching, something deep and unreadable stirring in her chest. Cecilia, on the other hand, was grinning ear to ear. Well, she mused, resting her chin on her palm. Looks like my dear Arthur finally knocked the Golden Prince off his throne. Seraphina, sitting a row below them, let out a quiet breath. Her silver hair cascaded over her shoulder as she closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. Alice Nightingale, sitting beside her husband, covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes glistening with something between awe and disbelief. Their son, Arthur, had just defeated the greatest prodigy of his generation. Arya was cheering happily, her face flushed with excitement. Back at the Colosseum, Arthur stood in the center of the battlefield, his chest rising and falling as he exhaled a long, steady breath. His body ached. His muscles burned. His mana reserves were nearly drained. And yet, he had won. As the crowd roared, as the realization settled into the bones of every spectator, Arthur allowed himself a small, quiet smile. The world had doubted him. And now, the world had no choice but to see him. Underscore 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 underscore. I won. I won. The realization settled in, slow and surreal, as the final echoes of clashing mana faded into silence. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, my body trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what had just happened. The winner of the finals of the Sovereigns Tournament, and thus the sovereign of the first years of Mythos Academy, Arthur Nightingale. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, but it was drowned out by the deafening roar of the crowd. A sea of faces, cheering, shouting, stunned into disbelief or reveling in exhilaration. It didn't matter. None of it registered. Because in front of me, Lucifer Windward lay on the ground, defeated. Even now, as he slowly pushed himself up onto one knee, his expression was unreadable. His verdant eyes, so often filled with an unshakable certainty, were shadowed with something else. Something foreign. Doubt. But before either of us could say a word, the air in the arena shifted. It was subtle at first, a ripple of mana that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Then, like a gathering storm, the pressure swelled, an overwhelming presence that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned my head just as a man stood from his seat in the VVIP section. Kem Kagu. Ren's father. One of the most powerful figures in the Kagu family. And he was furious. His gaze wasn't on me. It wasn't on Valerie, or even Ren. It was locked onto Lucifer, unwavering and unrelenting. It didn't take a genius to understand why. Lucifer Windward had awakened God's eyes, the legendary gift that had cemented the Kagu family's place in history, the power that had ensured their dominance for generations. A power that was supposed to be exclusive to their bloodline. And yet, here it was, manifesting in someone outside the Kagu lineage. Kem. Valerie's voice cut through the tension, low and measured. Her mana flared around her in a silent warning as she stepped forward, placing herself between him and the stage. Kem didn't move. His hands curled into fists at his sides, but his voice remained dangerously steady. I held back, waiting for the match to end. But I can't just stand by now. The Kagu family needs answers. Not here. Valerie's grip tightened on the sword she summoned from her spatial ring. You don't want to blow this out of proportion, do you? Blow it out of proportion? Kem scoffed, his expression twisting into something cold, something livid. What else can I do when an outsider is wielding our gift? The same gift that runs in my son's bloodline? The mana in the air crackled, thick with tension. The audience, who had been celebrating mere moments ago, fell into a hushed silence, watching the confrontation unfold with bated breath. But before Kem could take another step forward, another voice rang out, calm, smooth, and laced with an authority that froze the air itself. I agree with Valerie. This isn't the place. A chill ran through my veins. The weight of this presence was suffocating, like an invisible force pressing down on every inch of my body. I turned slowly, my instincts already screaming before my eyes confirmed it. A woman stood at the edge of the arena, clad in flowing robes of midnight and violet, her white hair cascading like silk over her shoulders. But it was her eyes that stole the breath from my lungs. Piercing. Unforgiving. The same eerie violet as Ren's. Selene Kagu. The head of the Kagu family. One of the 11 most powerful beings in the world. My throat went dry. Unlike Ren, whose god's eyes granted him a triple affinity, Selene Kagu wielded 4, ice, darkness, time, and water. She wasn't supposed to be here. Which meant only one thing. She had teleported. The Kagu family had their own teleportation network, linking Mythos Academy to their main headquarters. Meaning, the moment Lucifer awakened God's eyes, she must have seen it. And now, she was here for answers. Don't worry, Kem, she said, her voice smooth and controlled. I need answers too. But not here. Not in public. Kem exhaled sharply through his nose, his fury restrained but far from gone. His fists remained clenched, but he gave the barest nod. Selene's sharp gaze flickered briefly toward me, and despite my best efforts, a shiver ran down my spine. Then, she smiled. Not in amusement, not in kindness, but something knowing. Her violet eyes narrowed. But not at Lucifer. She was looking at something, no, someone, beyond him. He's here. Luna's voice whispered through my mind, a quiet tremor of warning. I stiffened, my breath hitching. And then, a figure stepped onto the stage. The already suffocating air grew heavier. A deep, unshakable weight settled over the entire arena. Sleek black hair. Brilliant green eyes. A presence so absolute it made even Selene Kagu pause. Arden Windward. One of the 2 kings of the north. And one of the strongest swordsmen in the world. Chapter 179, The Sovereign, 2. It was absurd. A scene ripped straight out of the kind of grand, cinematic showdown that felt too dramatic for reality. 2 immortal rankers. 2 radiant rankers. Standing right there in the middle of the ruined arena, their presences warping the very air around them. The battle between Lucifer and me had already sent ripples across the world, but this? This was something else. And as if things weren't theatrical enough, a figure descended, her navy blue hair flowing like liquid night under the arena lights. Eva Lopez, headmaster of Mythos Academy. It was rare to see her outside of the Academy's administrative matters. Even rarer to see her involve herself in disputes between factions. Yet here she was, stepping into a situation that was already tense enough to detonate at the slightest provocation. This is getting out of hand. Even without the 4 immortal rankers looming just outside the barrier, their presence is a watchful reminder that things could spiral at any moment. The sheer weight of mana condensed in the air was suffocating. The reason was simple. This was God's eyes. It wasn't just their most sacred bloodline ability, it was the very foundation of the Kagu family's identity. Their legacy. Their heritage. It was why Ren Kagu was supposed to be the golden child of his generation, the one destined to carry the family's banner. Yet now, Lucifer Windward, not of the Kagu bloodline, had just awakened it for himself. Selene Kagu, standing at the center of it all, wore an expression that sent a shiver down my spine. Her lips barely moved as she spoke, voice quiet, almost lazy, but carrying an undeniable weight. I assume, she murmured, purple eyes glinting like polished amethyst, there is a reasonable explanation for this, Arden? Selene wasn't just strong. She was the 2nd strongest radiant ranker in the world, second only to the Martial King himself. And the way she looked at Arden Windward now? That was the look of a monster deciding whether to rip someone apart for daring to exist. Arden, to his credit, didn't flinch. His sharp green eyes met hers without hesitation, his posture unwavering. "We should discuss this elsewhere," he said smoothly. His voice was measured, devoid of emotion, but the subtle weight in his tone made it clear he had no intention of backing down. Tension thrummed through the air like a bowstring pulled to the breaking point. Celine's fingers twitched slightly against her lips, her amusement, or irritation, impossible to read. "Fine," she said with a sigh, as if this were nothing more than an inconvenience. The very next moment, space twisted. With a flick of Celine's fingers, she, Kem, Lucifer, Arden, and Ren all vanished in a seamless teleportation, leaving behind nothing but a hollow silence in their wake. Even the crowd, who had been roaring in excitement just moments ago, fell into a hushed murmur, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. "Holy shit," someone muttered nearby. No one dared say more. Eva Lopez, still standing at the center of the stage, finally turned her attention to the crowd. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Enough. That single word snapped everything back into order. Instantly, the murmurs died. "Announcer," Eva said, not looking at her but somehow making it clear she expected immediate action. The announcer was already on it, stepping forward, her voice regaining its previous energy. Well, that was a bit of excitement. But no need to worry, everyone. The situation is being handled. Now, let's get back to what really matters, the tournament. We have more matches to get through, after all. The artificial enthusiasm worked. The audience, though still visibly shaken, began shifting back into the mood of the festival, the tension bleeding away little by little. I took one last glance at where Celine and the others had vanished. Lucifer had unlocked God's eyes. That much was clear. And if this played out like it did in the novel, nothing would come of it, at least not in a way that would directly hurt him. If anything, this would be his greatest advantage. A power beyond reason. His second gift, finally awakened. But it still wasn't enough. Even with the overwhelming force of his newfound power, even with the sheer weight of expectation and prophecy pressing down on him, Lucifer Windward had lost. And I had won. The sovereign of the first years. It almost felt surreal as I stood there, the echoes of the battle still humming through my body, my breathing steady despite the exhaustion creeping into my limbs. The weight of my sword in my grip felt different now, lighter, like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. On the edge of the stage, Headmaster Eva watched me with an approving smile, her usually sharp expression softening just slightly. "Well done, Arthur." I turned to face her fully, straightening my posture as she continued. "Congratulations on becoming the sovereign of the first years." I inclined my head in a respectful bow. "Thank you, Headmaster." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before she added, "Paul Locrian sent a request to see you. He asked for it during your match against Lucifer." My brow furrowed slightly at the name. Paul Locrian. A legend in necromantic circles. He was the pinnacle of traditional necromancy, someone who had reached the peak without a supernatural gift to aid him, only skill and relentless mastery. "He won't take up much of your time," Eva assured me. I nodded. "I'll meet him before the festival." With that, I turned, stepping off the stage. A single clap rang through the arena. Then another. Clap. 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 More followed, rippling outward in waves. By the time I stepped down, the entire stadium was on its feet. The applause rolled over me like a tidal wave, thunderous and relentless, filling the air with a deafening roar of approval. They were cheering for me. The weight of it settled into my chest, not heavy, not suffocating, but real. All the effort, all the training, all the nights spent pushing myself beyond what I thought was possible. It hadn't been for nothing. I succeeded. A slow smile spread across my face as I made my way toward the exit. And then, arms wrapped around me. That was incredible. Rachel's voice was bright with excitement, her arms tightening around me. You won. Against Lucifer. I let out a breathless chuckle, hugging her back. Yeah. I did. As I pulled away, Cecilia, Serafina, and Rose were all there too, their faces alight with pride and something else, something warmer, something that made my chest tighten slightly. Serafina gave me a small nod, her eyes shining with quiet satisfaction. You were extraordinary. Rose just smiled, shaking her head. I knew you'd win. Cecilia, of course, smirked. Took you long enough. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. Then, my gaze shifted beyond them. And there they were. Mother. Father. And Arya. My mother's hands were clasped in front of her, but her sapphire blue eyes were shining with unshed tears. My father stood tall beside her, his expression unreadable at first, until I saw the slight tilt of his lips, the proud gleam in his gaze. And Arya was bouncing on her feet, practically vibrating with excitement, her dark hair swinging wildly as she waved at me. Big bro, you beat him, she shouted, grinning ear to ear. You actually beat that guy. I exhaled sharply, walking over to them. My mother pulled me into a hug first, holding me tightly, her hands gripping my back as if she never wanted to let go. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. My father placed a firm hand on my shoulder, his grip solid, grounding. You've done well, Arthur. I met his gaze, nodding slightly. Thank you, father. Arya, of course, chose chaos. She launched herself at me, nearly knocking me off balance as she latched onto my arm. You were so cool. Like a hero in the stories. But even better. I laughed, ruffling her hair as she pouted at me. Thanks, Arya. It was a moment, one I let myself have. Standing here, surrounded by the people who had shaped me, the people who believed in me. But there was still more to do. I pulled away, my eyes flickering toward the grandstand where the VIPs were seated. I have to meet someone before the festival starts, I said, glancing at my mother and father. Paul Locrian. All right, we'll see you later, my mother said as she caressed my face. I turned to my friends next, meeting each of their gazes in turn. I'll be back soon. Rachel frowned slightly, but she nodded. Serafina simply said, we'll be waiting. Cecilia just smirked, as if she knew something I didn't. With that, I took a breath, steadying myself. And then I made my way toward the meeting that awaited me. Chapter 180, The Sovereign, 3. The VVIP box was more than just a vantage point, it was the power center of the world, a place where the true rulers of the continents gathered. When Eva informed me that I had been granted access at the request of several immortal rankers who wanted to meet me, I knew this was more than just a congratulatory gesture. It was an evaluation. I climbed the steps with measured strides, feeling the weight of unseen gazes even before I entered. The moment I stepped through the doors, the air changed. The pressure was subtle yet undeniable, like walking into the den of apex predators who, while not overtly hostile, were watching my every move with sharp, calculating eyes. Valerie and Kemkagu were absent, but the remaining 4 immortal rankers were enough to fill the room with a suffocating presence. Duke Blazespout, a peak immortal ranker from the central continent, sat with his hands clasped over his cane, his expression unreadable beneath the flickering light of a floating mana lamp. Paul Locrian, mid-immortal ranker and the western continent's finest necromancer, leaned back in his chair, his piercing gaze the only movement he made as he regarded me with quiet intensity. Lee Zenith, high immortal ranker from the eastern continent and my master in swordsmanship, was the first to step forward, a rare smile gracing his face. And finally, Leon Vizirian, another peak immortal ranker from the southern continent, whose presence radiated the kind of easy confidence that only someone with absolute power could exude. Only the northern continent lacked representation. Arthur, Lee said first, his tone carrying an almost paternal warmth. I bowed deeply. Master. You succeeded in your goal, he said, pride evident in his voice. Yes, Master. It was only possible because of your teachings, I replied truthfully. Without Li Zenith, I wouldn't have been able to construct my grade 6 art, the foundation of my victories against both Ren and Lucifer. Li gave a small chuckle. You flatter me. I simply guided the path, you are the one who walked it. Leon Vizirian leaned forward, his red hair gleaming under the light. Wow, so you're that unreal prodigy, huh? His grin widened. Congrats on winning. I've been watching, and I gotta say, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. Thank you, I said, inclining my head slightly in respect. He was, after all, one of the rulers of the southern continent. A true powerhouse. Duke Blazespout remained silent, his dark eyes giving nothing away. But he gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of my presence. That, in itself, was a statement. Then, there was Paul Locrian. So, you are the youngest Lich summoner, Paul finally spoke, his voice smooth, yet carrying an undertone of something deeper, curiosity, perhaps. Let's talk in private, shall we? I expected this. Paul was no ordinary necromancer. He was the pinnacle of what was achievable in necromancy without a gift, a testament to sheer will, intelligence, and mastery of mana. As an elder of the Ebony Tower and the leading candidate to be its next deputy tower master, his name carried weight across the western continent. And despite all that, he had never been able to create an ancient undead. I followed him into a separate chamber, the door sealing behind us with a quiet click. In an instant, his dark mana flared to life, coiling around the walls, weaving through the air in intricate patterns. A containment spell, one that would prevent any sound, any trace of what was about to be discussed, from leaking beyond this room. Luna stirred in my mind. Arthur, be careful. I silenced her with a mental nudge. I expected this. Paul folded his arms, studying me. Let's not waste time. You created an ancient undead. A statement, not a question. I smiled, though my grip on my own mana tightened. I did. How? His voice was calm, patient even, but there was an intensity behind it that couldn't be ignored. I met his gaze, unflinching. Wouldn't you like to know? A flicker of something, amusement, frustration, crossed his features before vanishing behind his usual composed expression. I do, he admitted. I saw your battle against Lucifer in the finals. Your control over your Lich, no ordinary summon. It is an ancient undead, without a doubt. He paused, tilting his head slightly. That shouldn't have been possible since you don't have a gift for dark mana beyond getting affinity towards it. He was right. The reason ancient undead were considered impossible to create without a gift for dark mana. It was because the very process of binding a sentient soul to a construct defied all known necromantic theory. The wall of talent in necromancy wasn't just about ability, it was about reality itself refusing to allow the outcome. And yet, I had done it. Paul sighed, as if trying to rationalize it himself. Even the Ash Bluffs haven't been able to create one without using their powerful gift. There is no documented method, no theoretical basis. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. So, Arthur, tell me. How did you do it? I tapped my fingers against my arm, feigning thoughtfulness. Talent? I offered, letting a small smirk tug at the corner of my lips. Paul let out a short laugh, though his eyes remained sharp. Talent, is it? A convenient answer. I shrugged. You tell me. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before he sighed, rubbing his temples. I can't tell if you're toying with me or if you genuinely don't know. He eyed me again, this time with something bordering on suspicion. Do you? My smile faded slightly. That was the problem. I didn't. I had memories of assembling Erebus, of weaving the mana threads, of refining the process itself into something more elegant than any other known method. But the critical moment? The point where the basilisk heart's remnant consciousness had shifted? Where a lifeless construct had become something more? There was nothing. A blank space in my mind. An absence. Even Luna, with all her knowledge, had no answer for it. I exhaled, my expression smoothing out. All I know is that I succeeded. Paul regarded me with the careful scrutiny of a man dissecting a particularly fascinating specimen. His dark eyes held no arrogance, just a cool, calculating curiosity. Then, after a long, weighted pause, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling lightly. "I'll make you an offer," he said, his tone as composed as ever. "Your lich is the first recorded instance of an ancient undead being created under normal mana laws. A feat that should have been impossible. And yet, here you are." He let that thought settle, watching me. I didn't react. I had already expected this conversation to happen the moment he showed interest in my work. "I believe that, in time, you'll uncover exactly how you managed it," Paul continued. "And when that happens, I want to work alongside you. My goal is simple: I want to create my own ancient undead." I didn't miss the blunt honesty in his words. He wasn't pretending to be altruistic, nor was he hiding behind flowery academic curiosity. He wanted my discovery. Plain and simple. I tilted my head slightly, feigning consideration. "And what do I gain from this arrangement?" Paul's lips curled faintly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of the expected question. "In the future, when the time comes for your second summon, I will assist you. Not just with the selection, but with its optimization, ensuring that it's a creature worthy of standing alongside your lich." That was a tempting offer on its own. But he wasn't finished. "Additionally," he added, his voice steady, "I will provide my expertise in modifying and evolving the skeleton of your lich, upgrading its physical structure to that of an arch-lich." My fingers tapped lightly against my thigh. Of course, he saw through it. The lich I had created, while exceptional, had a fundamental limitation: his body aspect. His growth was stunted in that regard, something that I would eventually need to remedy if I wanted him to reach its full potential. Paul knew that. And he was offering me the solution. "Do you find these terms acceptable?" he asked, watching me with quiet amusement, as if he already knew my answer. I pressed my lips together in thought, giving the appearance of measured consideration. It was a good offer. An exceptionally good one. And Paul Locrian wasn't the type to make casual deals. If he was investing in me, it was because he saw me as a worthwhile asset. I exhaled, then nodded. "All right. I accept." Paul's expression barely shifted, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in his gaze as he extended his hand. "Then I look forward to working with you, greatest genius of the new generation." I clasped his hand in a firm shake, matching his smile with one of my own.